Once upon a time, in a quiet and lonely place, I found myself working at a small radio station. It was the kind of place where the wind howled like a ghost, and the nights were long and dark. I loved my job, but sometimes I felt a chill in the air that I couldn't explain. If you like scary stories and want to hear about the strange things that happened to me, make sure to subscribe and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. You might want to grab a blanket because this story is about to get spooky. Every night, after the sun went down, I would sit in the control room, surrounded by stacks of records and old equipment that crackled and popped. The radio station was far from town, and I was the only one there, which made the silence feel even heavier. Sometimes I would play music to fill the empty space, but other times I just listened to the sounds of the night. It was peaceful, but I always felt like something was watching me. One night, while I was adjusting the dials, I heard a strange noise coming through the speakers. At first, I thought it was just static, but then I realized it was different. It sounded like voices. I leaned closer to the radio, my heart pounding. The voices were soft and distant, and I could barely make out what they were saying. They seemed to be calling for help. "Help us! Help us!" echoed through the airwaves, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just interference or my imagination playing tricks on me. But as the nights went on, the voices returned, clearer each time. They called to me, begging for assistance. I felt a strange pull to find out where they were coming from. I grabbed a notebook and started to jot down the times and frequencies. It became an obsession. I had to know who was talking to me. One night, I decided to trace the signal. I packed my bag with a flashlight, my radio equipment, and a map. The voices had led me to an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town. It had been empty for years, and there were stories about it being haunted. They said a terrible accident had happened there, and the souls of those who died were still trapped, trying to reach out for help. As I approached the building, the wind picked up, howling like a banshee. My heart raced, but I was determined to uncover the truth. I stepped inside, and the door creaked loudly behind me. The air was thick with dust, and the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. I flicked on my flashlight, and the beam cut through the gloom, revealing broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. I walked deeper into the building, and the voices grew louder, echoing in my mind. "Help us! Help us!" They were everywhere, surrounding me. I felt a cold breeze brush past me, and I shivered. I reached the main room, where the voices seemed to be coming from. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air felt heavy with sadness. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash behind me. I spun around, my heart racing. The door slammed shut, trapping me inside. Panic set in as I banged on the door, shouting for help. But the only response was the whispers, growing louder and more frantic. "Help us, help us!" I turned back to the room, and that's when I saw them. Shadows began to emerge from the corners, swirling around me like smoke. They were figures, their faces twisted in pain and despair. I could feel their sorrow wrap around me like a cold blanket. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. One of the figures stepped forward. It looked like a woman, her eyes hollow and filled with tears. "Help us," she whispered, reaching out a ghostly hand. I felt a surge of fear and sadness wash over me. I realized these were the souls trapped in this place, forever calling for help. They were lost, and I was the only one who could hear them. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her I would help, but I didn't know how. The other figures closed in, their voices a haunting chorus. "Help us! Help us!" It was overwhelming, and I felt tears streaming down my face. I had to do something. In that moment, I remembered the radio. I had to get back to the station and use the airwaves to reach out to someone, anyone, who could help these souls find peace. I turned and ran, the shadows chasing me, their cries echoing in my ears. I burst through the door and into the night, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove back to the radio station, my heart pounding. I rushed inside, fumbling with the equipment as I tried to set it up. I had to broadcast their message to let the world know what happened in that building. I turned on the microphone and spoke into it, my voice trembling. If anyone can hear me, there are lost souls in the old building on the outskirts of town. They need help. As I spoke, I felt a chill in the air, and the lights flickered. The voices returned, now more desperate than ever. Help us! Help us! I could feel their presence, their pain wrapping around me like a suffocating fog. I knew I had to keep going. I broadcasted their story, the tragedy that had trapped them in that place. Hours passed, and I felt exhausted, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep the message alive. I could hear the voices growing fainter, like they were fading away. Just as I thought I might lose them forever, I received a response. A local historian called in, intrigued by my story. He had heard about the building and the tragedy that had occurred there years ago. Together, we spread the word, gathering a group of people willing to help. They organized a search and rescue mission, hoping to uncover the truth and give the lost souls a chance to move on. I felt a glimmer of hope as I watched them prepare to head to the building. Maybe, just maybe, we could help them find peace. As the group left, I stayed behind at the station, keeping the airwaves open for any updates. The voices had quieted, but I could still feel their presence lingering. I hoped they would finally find the rest they deserved. Hours turned into days, and I waited anxiously for news. Then one night the phone rang. It was the historian. They had found something in the building, old records, photographs, and remnants of the past. They uncovered the truth about the tragedy, and it was heartbreaking. The souls had been trapped for so long, their stories untold. The historian promised to hold a memorial for the victims, to honor their memory, and give them the closure they needed. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The voices had quieted, and I knew they were finally at peace. But even as I celebrated, a part of me felt hollow. I had been touched by their sorrow, and I would never forget the chilling nights spent listening to their cries. I knew that the radio station would always hold a piece of their story, a reminder of the connection we shared. As I sat in the control room one last time, I felt a gentle breeze pass through, like a whisper of thanks. I smiled, knowing that I had done my part. The voices on the radio had led me to a truth that needed to be told, and for that, I would always be grateful. And so, I closed the door to the station, leaving behind the echoes of the past. But even now, on quiet nights, I sometimes hear a faint whisper on the airwaves. It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, there is always a chance for light to break through. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts and any spooky experiences you might have had as I sat in the control room, absorbing the sudden calm that enveloped the air. A flicker of doubt began to creep into my mind. I remembered those first haunting whispers and the figure in the shadows with its hollow eyes. The faint breeze drifting through the open window made me shudder. It was as if the past was still lingering, trying to reach out to me again. Days passed, and I found it hard to shake the feelings of dread that haunted me during my shifts. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, I would hear that familiar static on the radio, like a gentle reminder of the voices that once filled the air. One particularly late night, as I sipped my coffee, the room felt colder than usual. The old radio equipment began to crackle, and I could hear whispers start to filter through the static again. I straightened up, my heart racing as I listened intently. "Help us! Help us!" It pierced the silence, sharper and more urgent, like a knife cutting through the darkness. I grabbed my notebook, but this time I didn't write down frequencies. This time, I ran my hands over the dials, trying to tune into the voices calling out. But all I could hear were the cries of despair. The whispers seemed to echo off the walls, circling me like moths around a light. Suddenly, the lights above me flickered wildly, and I felt a cold breeze slide past me, brushing against my skin like icy fingers. Panic gripped me as I turned in every direction, looking for the source. "Who's there?" I shouted, but the only answer was the static that filled the air. The fear was so thick I could almost taste it. I decided I had to face it. I walked to the door, my breath coming in quick bursts as I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway of the station. The shadows wavered around me, and I fought the urge to run back. I remembered the darkness of the abandoned building and the sorrow I felt from the trapped souls. Maybe they haven't found peace, I whispered again to myself. The thought tightened my chest, and I turned back toward the control room to grab my flashlight. As I opened the door, a rush of cold air swept past me, almost knocking me back. It smelled like damp earth and something sweet like decaying flowers. That's when I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I whipped around, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty space. But the air was heavy with anticipation. With every quiet creak of the floor, I felt the energy shift, almost as if something was moving just beyond the edge of the light. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my ears as I sensed the shadows stretching behind me. As I reached the control room, the voices surged around me again, now filled with anger and desperation. "Why did you leave us?" they cried, the sound reverberating in the small space. I pressed my palms against the desk, trying to steady myself. The connection to the souls felt like a thick rope binding us, tugging at my very being. Taking a deep breath, I made the decision to return to the building where those voices first reached me. It was as if I had no choice but to answer their call once more. Grabbing my jacket and flashlight, I headed toward the door, feeling a strange mix of terror and resolution. The drive was unsettling, with every passing shadow feeling like it was alive. The roads were empty, and the darkness seemed to stretch on forever, amplifying my anxiety. Finally, I reached the abandoned building. It loomed before me, its outline barely visible against the night sky, a monstrous figure waiting silently for my return. Gripping the flashlight in one hand, I stepped out of my car, the cold air biting at my skin. As I walked closer, the eerie stillness pressed against me, like a heavy blanket smothering every sound. Once inside, I flicked on my flashlight, casting a beam that illuminated dust particles dancing in the air. The silence felt like a living thing, so thick it made it hard to breathe. I ventured deeper into the heart of the building, retracing my steps from before. With each creak of the floorboard, the memories surged back, the cries, the sorrow, the shadows. "Help us." I could almost feel them hovering around me, their energy filling the space. In the main room, the symbols on the walls seemed to shimmer under my flashlight. I approached them cautiously, my fingers brushing against the cool, cracked surface. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered, and the shadows deepened. "Help us, please." The cries grew louder, swirling around me, and my heart raced. In that moment, it hit me. These voices were desperate. They were trapped in their own pain, replaying the moments of their tragedy over and over. I felt a rush of determination. "I will help you," I shouted into the darkness. "I will tell your story." The shadows responded with a sudden intensity, drawing closer, their cold presence wrapping around me, both suffocating and electrifying. But as I stood firm, a chill swept through the room, and the atmosphere shifted. The walls trembled, and I stumbled back as a loud crash echoed through the building. My flashlight flickered again, but I squinted into the growing darkness. Then, without warning, long-forgotten memories surged forth, flashes of what had happened here. Screaming voices, a tragic fire, the faces of lost souls trapped in this place, forever longing for release. Suddenly, shadows broke free from the corners, swirling around me like a dark storm. I felt the weight of their sorrow pulling me down, threatening to drown me in despair. "Why did you bring us back?" they wailed, their cries a mix of pain and rage. But I fought against it, recalling all the love I felt for them and the promise I had made. "I'm here for you," I yelled over the cacophony of voices. "We can find a way to set you free." In answer, the shadows seemed to pause, their swirling forms oscillating like waves. Just then, my flashlight flickered off completely, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged as I felt the chill increase, my breaths quickening into gasps. "Help us!" The voices wailed frantically, echoing in the thick silence. I groped for my flashlight, but my surroundings felt strange, almost alive, pulsating with energy. Suddenly, I felt something brush against my arm, a soft, cold touch that sent a shock through me. I turned, expecting to see more shadows, but instead, I faced the silhouette of a woman, faint and flickering like an old film. Her hair hung in tangled strands, and her eyes seemed empty, yet filled with pain. "You've come to help us," she whispered, her voice barely a breeze. "Please, we need you." Before I could respond, the room shook, and the shadows around her swelled, threatening to engulf her completely. In desperation, I pulled my voice together. "What do you want me to do?" The woman's figure faltered for a moment, struggling against the torrent of darkness. "Find a source," she gasped. "Find a source of our pain." As I watched her fade, I felt an unsettling urgency fill me. "Where?" I shouted into the void, but all I received was silence. The room calmed for just a moment before a deafening crack resounded, opening a fissure in the ground. My heart raced as I backed away, watching fragments of the floor break free, revealing a dark void beneath. I knew I had to look deeper. It might hold the key to unlocking the tragedy bound to this place. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself as I approached the gaping hole. The air was thick with an energy so dark it almost felt alive. "Help us!" The voices pleaded once more, and I could sense their anguish reflecting off the walls. With renewed determination, I knelt at the edge of the opening, peering down into the abyss. Just as I was about to lean closer, I saw a faint light flickering at the bottom, like a beacon calling to me. "Is that it?" I wondered, a rush of hope flooding through me. But at that moment, the room trembled, and the shadows surged forth again, swirling chaotically. "Do not go down there!" The woman's voice returned, now stronger, but filled with urgency. "Stay! You must guide us!" But the chaos pushed at me, pulling me toward the darkness. With sheer force of will, I gripped the edge of the floor, feeling the ground shake beneath me. I couldn't let the darkness take me. "I won't leave you," I called back, my voice determined despite the overwhelming fear. "Tell me what to do." But the shadows only shrieked louder, crashing against me like waves in a storm. The temperature dropped, and I felt icy fingers clutch at my heart. "Help us!" they cried, the voices merging into a dissonant chorus of agony. With one final push, they lunged, and I managed to leap back, avoiding their grasp. But in that moment of distraction, the light in the darkness flickered faster, as if something was struggling to emerge. I squinted into the void, feeling a strange pull toward it, and I realized the light was a memory, a piece of their history waiting to be set free. "Please!" I shouted, my voice hoarse over the rising tide of anguish. "Let me help you." But the shadows pushed back, trying to drown my voice in their despair. The room shook violently, the power of their collective sorrow crashing around me. And just then, with a bone-chilling wail, the darkness surged toward me, enveloping me in a whirlpool of past despair. I felt myself being pulled down into the abyss, the weight of their pain descending upon me like a crushing wave. In that terrifying moment, I understood this was their last chance. They needed to share their stories, their truth, and I was the only one who could listen. "Tell me," I screamed into the overwhelming darkness. "Tell me everything." And as the final words left my lips, the void beneath me erupted in a blinding light, casting away the shadows that enveloped me. I could feel the presence of every soul, swirling like a tempest. Suddenly, vision struck me, memories hitting me like lightning flashes, fragments of lives lived, joys and tragedies, moments that had been held captive for so long. I saw the faces, heard the laughter, felt the warmth of love before it turned into heart-wrenching sorrow. In the chaos, I understood they were no longer just voices. They were friends, family, lost loved ones, all desperate for remembrance. "Remember us," they cried, their voices lifting as if seeking the surface of a raging sea. With every ounce of strength, I focused on the light, reaching for it, pleading the way I had to pull them from their plight. "Your stories matter," I shouted. "Your memories are alive." The very fabric of the building trembled as power surged all around me in waves. Lights flickered above, illuminating the shapes of the souls swirling within the shards of light and darkness. And as the energy pulsed, weaving their essence into the air, I felt the weight lessening. Thank you. Thank you. The voices transformed from anguish to gratitude, and I knew they were finally finding peace. The darkness around me began to fade, dissipating into nothingness. I felt lightness in my chest, a sensation I had never known before. The shadows, once restless, now settled, the weight of their stories lifting as they finally shared their truth. The voices whispered their final goodbyes, wrapping around me like a gentle embrace before melting into the air. Just as I felt the last touch of sorrow fade away, I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance. The room fell silent, the chill evaporating into warm stillness around me. I looked down into the gaping void, now just a hollow space reflecting moonlight, and I realized that the tragedy of this place had been transformed. With trembling hands, I reached for the symbols on the wall, which had begun to glow softly, pulsing with new energy. They no longer felt heavy with sorrow. Instead, they shimmered with the memories of lives lived. I stepped back, heart racing but filled with a new hope, as the very air around me began to feel lighter. Then I heard a soft voice, gentle and clear, emerging from the silence. "You have set us free." The words resonated through the room, wrapping around me like a warm hug. "Now we can finally rest." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the truth. I had answered their call, spoken their stories, and in that moment, I felt a profound change in the energy of the room. It was as if the shadows had finally released their grip on the building, allowing the remnants of sorrow to dissipate into the night air. But just as I began to relax, a shiver ran down my spine. The silence morphed into an oppressive stillness that felt off, almost like a warning. I glanced around, my heart racing, searching for any sign of the souls who had found hope. Yet, the shadows remained still, and the air grew heavy again, thickening with a sense of dread that made my skin crawl. A sudden crash echoed from the upper floor, sending a wave of adrenaline through me. I froze, my pulse quickening as I strained to hear over my own heartbeat. The noise had come from a place I'd never ventured, an attic filled with decaying beams and forgotten memories. A sense of foreboding washed over me, but I knew I had to investigate. With a shuddering breath, I made my way toward the staircase. The wooden steps creaked beneath my weight, echoing in the silence, each sound amplifying my anxiety. As I climbed, I could feel a strange energy swirling around me, the air crackling with unease. With every step upward, I felt a pull, as if something was luring me into the darkness above. Finally, I reached the door leading to the attic. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle, the rusted metal protesting as I pushed it open. The room was cloaked in shadows, the only light filtering in through cracks in the ceiling, casting haunting patterns on the dusty floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper in the oppressive quiet. No answer came, but the air felt charged like static before a storm. In the far corner, I saw what looked like a trunk, half hidden beneath a tattered sheet. I felt drawn to it, although a part of me screamed to turn back. As I approached with slow, cautious steps, the trunk seemed to pulse, almost alive with memory. Muffled whispers whispered around me, the voices swaying between desperation and anger. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I uncovered the sheet, revealing a trunk painted with faded symbols similar to those on the walls below. With a deep breath, I lifted the heavy lid, and it creaked open with an eerie groan. Inside lay a jumble of old photographs, newspapers, and brittle letters, all yellowed with age. But as I sifted through them, a chilling realization flooded over me. These were the remnants of the tragedy, the stories of lives lost, families torn apart, dreams extinguished. One photograph caught my eye. It showed a group of smiling faces, but I noticed something unsettling in the background. A shadowy figure lurked just beyond the edges, half hidden, eyes glinting like dull coals. I shivered involuntarily, dread pooling in my stomach. What had really happened here? As I turned the photograph over, a name scrawled in shaky handwriting sent chills down my spine. Evelyn. The name echoed in my mind, the whispers around me growing louder. Evelyn. She cannot know. Suddenly the air grew, colder, and the shadows seemed to swell around me, wrapping tightly like a suffocating blanket. I dropped the photograph, stumbling back in fear as the shadows twisted into familiar forms, ghostly, pale figures trapped in an eternal struggle. "Who are you?" I shouted, feeling the heat of their anger radiate toward me. "We were betrayed," one voice hissed, echoing in the chilling darkness. Evelyn knew. The figures swayed closer, their translucent hands reaching out, beckoning me toward the trunk again. "Find out the truth," they urged, their eyes dark with anguish. Before I could respond, the trunk began vibrating violently, rattling on its hinges in a manner that felt otherworldly. The shadows grew frantic, and the air thrummed with an energy that made my hair stand on end. I felt paralyzed with fear, as if trapped in an unseen web, struggling against the grip of restless souls. In a burst of terror, I lunged for the door, desperately trying to escape the growing chaos. But before I reached it, a blast of cold air slammed it shut with such force it echoed throughout the attic. The voices reached a fever pitch, swirling around me like a violent storm, filling the room with bitter wails and screams. "Evelyn," they cried. "She holds the key." In that moment, the shadows disappeared, and I stood alone in the dim light, shaking with dread. I glanced back at the trunk, its lid still open, revealing the chaos inside, as if beckoning me to delve deeper. Against my better judgment, I forced myself to go closer. Reaching inside again, I pulled out a faded letter, its edges frayed. The moment I unfolded it, a cold breeze swept through the room, causing the shadows to flicker back, filling the corners with ominous whispers. The letter was written to Evelyn, filled with words of desperation and fear. It spoke of a family torn apart, hiding a dark secret that refused to be buried. "They will never forgive us," one sentence stood out, chilling me to the bone. "Evelyn's silence will be our curse." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as the pieces began to come together. What had Evelyn done to deserve such sorrow? Before I could process the implications, the room shook violently again, and the shadows surged back with renewed vigor. "Find her!" they wailed in unison, their voices merging into a cacophony of anguish. I stumbled back, my mind racing. "Where?" I questioned, looking for guidance among the chaos. But all I received were frantic gestures from the ghostly figures, urging me to leave the attic and return below. Heart pounding, I made my way down the stairs, feeling as if the entire building was alive with restless energy. Just as I reached the main room, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a pale figure standing in the doorway, watching me with hollow eyes. A sob escaped my lips as I approached, recognizing the face from the photograph. The same ghostly woman. She pointed toward a dark corner of the room, where the shadows writhed like a living beast. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing din of wailing. The realization struck me hard. Evelyn's spirit hadn't found peace. She was entwined in the darkness of her own making. The memories of the tragedy clung to her, rooted in the very fabric of this building. "Will you help her?" Another voice begged, urging me to try to confront the truth. Without hesitation, I nodded. I knew what I had to do. With every step toward that shadowy corner, tension thrummed in the air. Warmth escaped the space around me, leaving only an icy grip on my heart. The shadows curled and twisted, whispering fervently about the wrongs that had been committed. "Face the truth," they urged, their voices a collective chant pushing me forward. Heart pounding, I stepped closer, hands trembling in anticipation. "Evelyn," I called, though my voice wavered with fear. "Show yourself." The shadows coalesced, swirling violently around me, creating a cyclone of darkness that threatened to engulf me whole. Suddenly, the form of a woman emerged, her face pale and twisted, tormented by a pain that transcended time. "Why have you come?" she hissed, anguish cutting through her tone. "I seek to help you," I replied, forcing myself to stand strong despite the overwhelming terror surrounding me. The air crackled with resentment, and the room plunged into shadow, my only illumination coming from the depths of her hollow eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," she spat, her voice dripping with bitterness. "Your curiosity has awakened the past. You cannot save me." "But I can," I insisted, my voice gaining strength. "You deserve to be free." At those words, the shadows pulsed violently, and her form flickered, torn between rage and vulnerability. "Free," she screeched, the darkness swirling faster. "You do not know what it means to be trapped in this life, haunted by my own mistakes." In a sudden surge, she lunged forward, cold fingers grasping at my throat. The pressure around my neck tightened, and I gasped, floundering in this unexpected battle with a lost spirit. "Tell me what happened," I choked out, desperation fueling my words. With each pleading whisper, the shadows around me shrank back, hesitating slightly. In that moment, I realized that I had to show her the light, the truth that lay buried among the pain. "Please, Evelyn," I gasped, "tell me your story." For a heartbeat, the pressure released, and I took in a ragged breath, feeling the tension in the room shift just a fraction. "But you must understand," she murmured, her voice softer. "Every truth has its price." "I'm ready for it," I vowed, staring into her vacant eyes, determined to bring peace to her tormented soul. The shadows around us trembled, and a flicker of light sparked in her gaze. "Then let me show you," she said, and suddenly, the darkness erupted, swallowing me whole. I felt myself being pulled into a maelstrom of memories, dizzying images colliding in a dizzying swirl. The cries of anguish morphed into scenes of laughter and love interwoven with despair and betrayal. I found myself standing at a lively gathering, a warm kitchen filled with aromas, the sound of clinking glasses and laughter echoing off the walls. Moments flowed past me, revealing Evelyn's life before it all fell apart. Faces of friends and family filled the space, their smiles bright and genuine. But as the vision shifted, I watched a shadow stalk at the edge of their happiness, waiting for the moment to strike. I felt Evelyn's heartbeat quickening, her joy turning into fear as the specter of betrayal began to consume her. "Do you see?" she implored, her voice breaking through the chaos. "This was once my life, a happiness I could not hold on to." Suddenly, the scene fractured, shifting into darkness. The party lights extinguished, leaving only a violent confrontation bathed in shadow. "Evelyn," a voice shouted. "Why did you let him in?" I could see the guilt on her face as accusations flew like daggers. In that moment, I understood that the specter haunting her was not just from the past, but a choice she had made that led to unspeakable consequences. "Flee," she cried in the vision, but it was too late, the darkness enveloping her once more. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling with pain. Suddenly, I found myself back in the attic, breathless and shaken. The shadows shifted restlessly, waiting for me to grasp the weight of what I had witnessed. "Will you understand my pain?" she asked, her form flickering in and out of focus. "I can help you forgive," I replied, though my words felt timid against the enormity of her grief. "Forgive?" she echoed, the anger flaring once again. "And stay trapped in this place? No, you can be free." Just then, shadows surged toward me, angry faces twisted in sorrow, reminding me of their own cries for liberation. "Choose!" they shouted tormentedly, a cautionary warning bouncing through my soul. "Will you save her or stay here forever?" The weight of their pain pressed down, a burden impossible to ignore, and I knew that the choice I made at that moment would forever change everything. "Evelyn," I said firmly, "we can find peace together, but we need to confront the truth. All of it, not just the parts you wish to see." She hesitated, the shadows around us flickering like candle flames caught in the wind. "Do you truly believe I deserve to be saved?" "Yes," I affirmed, my declaration filling the room. "It's time to let go of the pain." Evelyn's form wavered, and the dark power that had tied her down began to loosen its grip. "Help me remember," she whispered, her voice trembling as if she was finally allowing herself to hope. The shadows began to close in around us, hesitant but hungry for resolution. Together, we braved the void, and at that moment, I felt the chance for redemption lingering just beyond our reach. "Take my hand," I urged, extending my trembling fingers. Evelyn stared at me with wide, hollow eyes, uncertainty flickering across her ethereal face. But something changed within her, the shadows of doubt beginning to dissolve. Evelyn's form wavered, and the dark power that had tied her down began to loosen its grip. I felt a current of hope surge in the air, and I knew I couldn't let this moment slip away. "Trust me," I said, heart pounding as I stretched my hand toward her, the visible struggle flickering across her face. A fateful heartbeat passed before she finally reached out, her icy fingers wrapping around mine. At that instant, the room shook, the shadows recoiling as if hit by a sudden blast of light. Evelyn's eyes widened, revealing the depths of her troubled history. But even in that turmoil, I sensed a flicker of courage beginning to ignite. With a deep breath, I gripped her hand tighter, feeling the cold seep through me, but I pressed on. "Together, we can face whatever lies ahead," I promised. Suddenly, we were yanked backward into an abyss of memories, spiraling through a kaleidoscope of vivid, distorted images. I saw Evelyn, not as she was now, but as the vibrant woman she had been, lost in laughter at a crowded party, the glimmer of happiness lighting up her face. But the laughter quickly turned into dread, and the room warped violently around us until I stood in that same kitchen, watching a different moment play out. Evelyn was arguing with a man whose face blurred in and out, leaving only his baleful energy behind. "You don't understand," she screamed, desperation coating her words. "I'm doing this for us." But as his face twisted in anger, I felt a deep chill fill my bones. Suddenly, I was back in the present, the shadows swirling chaotically around us, and I realized how deeply intertwined her fate was with the darkness surrounding us. "Evelyn, you have to confront him," I urged, the connection of our hands a lifeline bringing us closer together against the tide of shadows. "Let him go," I insisted, my heart racing as the oppressive shadows threatened to consume us again. "Come to me," they whispered, seductive and sinister, luring me with the heaviness of the night. "No," I shouted, shutting my eyes tightly against their deafening cries. I felt Evelyn's grip tighten, freezing the shadows that swarmed around us, but I could sense the hesitation lurking within her. "Face your fear," I urged her, forcing my eyes to open, staring straight at the flickering forms. "Show us what really happened." The weight of her memories cracked open a door I could never have anticipated. A gust of cold wind swept through the attic, carrying whispers from lost souls. Voices fluttered around me like moths drawn to a flame, but they spoke only of pain and betrayal. I shivered, attempting to bridge the gap of fear that surrounded us. The spectral forms shifted menacingly, like predators circling their prey, urging Evelyn to retreat into the safety of her past. "Why should I trust you?" she spat, her voice trembling with mixed emotions, hurt colliding with flickers of hope. I felt the darkness press tighter around us, swirling with the weight of all she'd suffered. "Because there's a chance," I replied softly, "a chance you can reclaim your life. And I won't let go." The shadows pulsed angrily at my words, their relentless grip tightening like a noose around our throats. But I held my ground, my belief igniting like a beacon in the suffocating dark. "Relinquish the pain," I commanded, channeling every ounce of strength into my voice. The wind howled, the room trembling as the shadows surged forward, a cacophony of anguished wails that threatened to drown us in despair. I felt Evelyn falter, her resolve wavering, a flicker of fear crossing her features as the air crackled with overwhelming tension. "Look," I shouted, pointing toward the swirling mass of darkness. "See what it's trying to keep from you." The shadows recoiled momentarily, revealing glimpses of the past that they were desperate to shroud. Through the thick fog, I glimpsed flashbacks manifesting like ghostly echoes. Horrid moments filled with betrayal, fear, and regret that shaped her very existence. Remember the moment he betrayed you, I urged, feeling the warmth of her hand in mine, keeping her anchored to the present even as the past threatened to swamp her. Suddenly, the room darkened, the shadows coiling ominously toward us with every word I uttered. "Evelyn, face him!" I shouted as the air grew colder, pressing harder against my chest until I could barely keep breathing. "I can't," she murmured, her voice breaking. "His ghost will eat me alive again." A deep tremor shook the ground beneath us, sending loose debris skittering across the attic floor, but I gripped her hand tighter, a bond of strength pulsing between us. "You are stronger than you think," I cried, my voice echoing eerily in the quiet once more, desperation infusing my words. The wind howled furious, raining dust down, and I felt the shadows splash over us, clawing at our limbs. "Turn your pain into power," I yelled, willing her to see the truth buried beneath fear. Evelyn hesitated, the flicker of doubt wavering. But there was a deep spark igniting in her chest that slowly began to brighten. At that moment, she released a chilling scream that sliced through the darkness like glass shattering against concrete, resonating with her pain. "Get out!" she shouted into the void, and the shadows shrieked back, anger ricocheting through the air. "I will not let you control me any longer." As she shook off the last remnants of despair, the shadows recoiled from her rising strength, confusion swirling in their depths. Together, we stood against the entities surrounding us, trembling but resolute. In that powerful moment, I felt the dark energy begin to thin, like fog dissipating under the warm light of dawn. "Let her go!" I cried, and with those words, the chaos broke loose. A brilliant flash of luminescence exploded from Evelyn, blinding me momentarily, sending the shadows wailing back as they retreated from her newfound power. I felt her hand slip from mine, and as I turned, I saw her embracing the brightness that poured from her heart, a light that rivaled the darkest nightmares. "Evelyn!" I screamed, both terrified and exhilarated, watching as she confronted the swirling mass of darkness head-on. "Face the truth for what it is," she proclaimed boldly, her voice echoing with the weight of their shared history. In that instant, the shadows screamed, the cacophony rising to a piercing pitch as they lunged toward her with desperate fury. But she stood firm, the light intensifying around her, illuminating the darkness with a brilliant glow. I watched in awe as every scream split the air, slicing the shadows and unraveling their hold. Suddenly, manifesting from the depths of the shadowy surge was the man from Evelyn's memories, a burly figure cloaked in darkness, his face twisted in anger and fear. With each pulse of light, he grew more defined, the anger on his face morphing in a terrified realization. "Evelyn!" he roared, but she stood unwavering, wielding her light like a sword against the thin veil of night surrounding them. "You can't hide anymore," she shouted, stepping forward, light pouring from her. "Face what you've done." The darkness shrieked and writhed violently, but Evelyn's courage illuminated the space, making the shadows tremble, hesitant in her presence. Then, with a final push, Evelyn lifted her hands and gathered the shimmering light, launching it forward. It pierced the darkness with a brilliant flare that split the shadows apart, exposing the remnants of pain buried beneath. Shouting erupted from the dark figure hushed into silence, and suddenly, I felt a wave of energy pulse through the room. The shadows, once ominous, began to wash away like ink in water. "Everyone deserves peace," she cried, reclaiming her power as a storm of memories swept through the attic. I could feel the loss, the sadness, but also a profound sense of renewal. The air shifted again, light pouring into the space as the darkness sputtered and faded into wisps of smoke, releasing tortured souls back into the ether. Trembling on that backbone of light and fury, Evelyn turned her tear-streaked face to me. "I've broken the chains," she whispered, a soft smile dissolving into relief. "But we must finish this together." I nodded, feeling the hope rise in my chest as her warmth enveloped me. With our hands connected once more, we leaned into the remnants of shadows still lurking, determined to banish every trace of despair that lingered in this place. Together, we shouted in unison, voices strong against the last remnants of fear. The shadows hissed but began to unravel, their grip breaking under the light emanating from our joined hands. As the last swirl of darkness dissipated, I felt a profound peace settle in the air, and the oppressive weight that had haunted these walls for so long began to fade. The attic transformed, sunshine spilling through the cracks, illuminated dust dancing like fairies in the warm embrace of light. And as I turned to Evelyn, her form shimmering with ethereal beauty, we understood that at this moment, both haunted and healer, we had finally found true freedom. But then, a chill ran down my spine as the last wisp of darkness slipped away, and I heard an echoing laughter, a sound both familiar and unsettling. It reverberated through the newly still air, creeping back into my consciousness like a dark thought lurking behind every moment of clarity. I glanced around the now bright room, aware that something still clung to the shadows just beyond my reach. Evelyn noticed my hesitation, her brow furrowing with concern. "Not all spirits are willing to let go," she murmured, eyes scanning the corners where the light barely penetrated. Suddenly, I felt a chilling presence creep back in, whispering secrets of unresolved pain, like a predatory ghost waiting in the corners of our victory. "We need to be careful," I said, my voice trembling as I peered into the darkness that lingered. The ground beneath me shook as we sensed the lingering traces of the past, and I caught sight of fleeting figures darting through the shadows, flickering like candle flames about to go out. "The walls remember," Evelyn whispered, a look of dread creeping back into her eyes. "What if they're still trapped?" Before I could respond, a shadow sprang forward, forming into the shape of a woman, face twisted and vengeful, eyes burning with unshed tears. "Evelyn!" she screeched, a cry stitched with desperation, and suddenly all of the shadows around her surged forward, echoing the familiar voices of countless souls, crying for their peace. The room filled with their desperate wails, clawing at the remnants of our liberation, as Evelyn and I stood paralyzed. "Listen to us," they screamed, their cries intertwining in a cacophony of despair. "You cannot forget." The walls shuddered with their anguish, creating a storm of voices that threatened to swallow us whole once more. "What do we do now?" I asked, fear creeping into my chest as I clutched Evelyn's hand tightly. "We face them," she replied, determination flickering in her eyes once more. But the shadows swarmed around her, a dark tide that threatened to drown out the light we had just birthed. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steadying even as the panic around us swelled and roared. I took a deep breath, trembling but resolute in my choice. "Yes," I said, ready to confront whatever ghost lurked in the corners of truth. This time, the light wouldn't bend. We would shine brightly against the darkness, no matter how deeply it clawed for reclamation. Evelyn stepped forward, summoned the remaining energy of the room, and glared at the shadowy figures emerging, their faces familiar yet grotesque, twisted in torment. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. With a wave of her hand, she released a wave of light that erupted in the room, illuminating the shadows, revealing the pale faces of the trapped souls. "Who are you?" one of them cried out, her voice desperate and raw, eyes wide with longing. "We are the Forgotten," another whispered, eyes darting anxiously between us. But Evelyn stood tall, her presence empowering me as the figures flickered around us. "Your stories matter," she declared, stepping into the light. "They deserve to be heard, just like mine." And as the shadows seemed to shrink away from her glow, the souls in front of us began to coalesce, their anguished faces fading into clarity. "I was wrong," one of the spirits cried, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. "I thought I could control it, but it controlled me instead." The other spirits around her nodded, shadows flickering in and out, their expressions twisting between anger and sorrow. Evelyn stepped closer, determination etched on her features. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady yet soft, resonating in the heavy air. The girl in the front, her features fragile and gaunt, pointed a trembling hand toward us. "To be set free," she wailed, her voice cracking with pain. "We are lost in torment," another spirit added, floating closer, their ethereal form almost melding with the darkness. "You must help us." A cold wind swept through the attic, sending shivers down my spine, and I could feel the darkness pulse around us as if it were alive, inhaling our fear. "A sacrifice must be made," the first spirit insisted, her voice echoing eerily off the walls. The shadows writhed, whispering secrets to one another, the weight of their suffering settling over us like a shroud. "What kind of sacrifice?" I asked, my heart racing as dread crept into my veins. The air thickened, and silence fell over the room. It felt as if time had stilled, the very essence of the space vibrating with tension, and the spirits turned their hollow, pleading eyes toward us. "Someone must stay," the gaunt girl whispered, the shadows weaving around her like a dark cloak. "Someone must understand our pain, living on this side." Evelyn stepped back, horror filling her eyes as the implications of their words sunk in. "No," she cried, her voice breaking. "We've already suffered enough." But the spirits pressed forward, their forms flickering. "Your light binds us, but it also exposes us," one of the other spirits hissed, face twisting into a mask of rage and despair. "You cannot just walk away." The room darkened further as they began to swirl around us, tightening their grip with each heartbeat, pulling me toward them. I felt a panic rise within, a creeping realization that this task was more than I had prepared for, more than I ever wanted. "Evelyn, what do we do?" I shouted, my voice almost lost in the din of the now howling wind behind us. She grabbed my arm, staring wide-eyed into the encroaching abyss, her fear palpable, yet so was her resolve. "We need to answer their call. Face what they have lost. Face what they've lost." I echoed, confusion blending with dread. Suddenly, the spirits' cries became distinct, voices mixing into a horrific chorus of agony laced with anger and shame. "I was abandoned. I was betrayed. Help me forgive." Each word struck me like a blow, their raw emotions seeping into my skin, coiling around my heart. As I turned to comfort Evelyn, the shadows lashed out, swiping at our feet, winding tendrils wrapping around my ankles, dragging me backward. "Stay with us," they pleaded, their voices slinking into whispers, an enticing melody that wrapped around my brain like a foggy dream. A chill shot through my body as visions of despair flooded my mind. Flashes of faces from the past, friends lost to darkness, and family broken by betrayal raced through, sharpening my fear of the connections so painfully lost. "No!" I screamed, shaking my head furiously, but their voices continued, drowning me with sadness. "Every sacrifice you didn't make, it's here. Every moment you walked away, it's here." The weight of truth wrapped around me tighter, suffocating in its intensity. I felt Evelyn's hand slip from mine as I was yanked backward into a memory, falling deeper into the recesses of despair, encasing me in its icy grip. Suddenly, I found myself standing in a desolate place, an old graveyard bathed in mist, headstones looming like sentinels. The very air tasted bitter, heavy with the decay of loss, and as I turned, I saw faces emerging from the fog, those who had been lost, anguished faces twisted in sorrow. "Why did you forget us?" a voice wailed, a piercing cry that echoed into the night. "There's nothing here for you," another shrieked, finger pointing into my heart. "You left us to rot." Struggling to comprehend, I took a step back, but the ground felt unsteady beneath me, collapsing into a swirling darkness that pulled me down. I could feel panic rising as every whisper screamed louder, a torrent of rage and betrayal flooding my mind, wrapping around my throat like a noose. "Stop!" I begged, grasping at the seams of reality, but the shadows pulled my very essence apart. exposing every unresolved fear that I had buried deep. And then, as if the darkness had heard my plea, it released me, spilling me back into the attic where Evelyn was still fighting against the onslaught. But her light flickered as the shadows closed in, encircling her like a venomous serpent. "Evelyn!" I shouted, lunging toward her, reaching for the fading glow. With every ounce of strength I had left, I pushed forward, desperate to break through the dark tide. But the spirits screamed in protest, swooping in, their forms distorted between agony and fury, blocking my path. "Don't you dare!" one of them shrieked, and I felt its cold breath wash over me, sending chills racing down my spine. "Let her be!" I cried, fighting against the pull of despair. "In this place, nothing belongs to the living," another voice hissed, the air thick with anger and sorrow. As I slipped further into the shadows, I glimpsed the darkness swirling, invisible hands clawing at my mind and heart, dragging me deeper into fear. Evelyn struggled against their grip, her silhouette flickering ominously, a beacon barely clinging to the surface. "Fight with me," she called, voice breaking. My vision blurred, distorted images flooding back, the memories of every moment I ignored my own pain, every regret for those I had lost swirling into focus. With renewed determination, I shouted, "Evelyn, I can't lose you." Summoning everything I had, I pushed forward, drawing upon the hidden strength I thought I had lost in the overwhelming tide. The whispers intensified, cutting through the air like knives. But the realization of what we were facing began to dispel the fog. In a flash, I remembered my own pain, the pain of those I couldn't save, and a surge of empathy ignited within me. "I'm sorry," I cried to the spirits. "I should have listened to you." Their faces twisted in surprise, and momentarily, the darkness waned, their angry cries faltering. "The past cannot be changed," a voice whispered, barely audible beneath the rising wind. "But it can be accepted. It can be healed. I know it hurts," I continued, words fueled by desperation. "But we have to let go." Evelyn turned toward me, her heart blazing with light, and together we pushed against the tide, the fear that had kept us tethered to pain. "Together," she shouted, and I saw the flickering shadows freeze in fearful anticipation. With one last cry, we unleashed the power of our shared light, merging our resolve in a radiant burst that shimmered through the darkness. It exploded outward, illuminating the room and unraveling the tempest of shadows, tearing through the very fabric of despair that had held them captive. The spirits shrieked as the light pierced them, exposing their broken forms. But there was something transformative happening. The harsh wails began to fade into soft gasps, eyes widening in recognition rather than rage. "It's too late," the gaunt girl murmured, dissolving into tendrils of smoke. "No!" I screamed, stepping closer to Evelyn, wrapping her in my embrace. "It doesn't have to end this way." With each pulse of light, I felt the warmth spread through me, flickering hope igniting the forms around us. Evelyn lifted her head, eyes fierce, and took a step forward, resolute. "We are not here to surrender," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "We're here to remember." In that moment, the shadows dimmed as whispers of acceptance swept through them, each spirit softening beneath the glow of renewed purpose, each feature tracing the outline of lost hope now tinged with resolution. "Remember us," the girl urged softly, voice lighter than a feather, "and help us rest. Together, we reclaim our stories," Evelyn shouted, her light cascading into the dark corners, filling the room with warmth and clarity. "Listen to us." The shadows flickered uncertainly, but as the edges brightened, they began to unravel, letting out soft cries, voices now bereft of anger. "I can let you go," Evelyn encouraged, her own light shining bright, "but you have to be ready to move on." As the last shadows thinned, the anguish began to lift, revealing ethereal smiles blooming where despair once ruled. "I forgive you," I said, my voice breaking through the distance between us and their forgotten pain. "We can be set free together," Evelyn echoed, tears glistening but glimmering with hope. And as the spirits finally faded into the light, their anguished cries transformed into soft whispers of gratitude. "You have lit the way," they breathed, their forms dissipating into warmth, leaving behind nothing but tranquility. The attic, once a place of torment, now shimmered as sunlight poured in, wrapping us in a soft embrace. I turned to Evelyn, who glowed with a fierce radiance. Yet behind her eyes lingered a shadow of uncertainty, a reminder of the darkness that had sought to consume her. "We did it," she whispered, all flickering across her tired face. And yet, I felt an echo of concern weaving through the solitude that filled the newly brightened space. But deep down, a terrifying realization loomed. There were still traces of darkness yet unexplored. We had freed those souls, but what about the ones who remained? The ones that dug deeper into our hearts? "Evelyn," I said slowly, a chill creeping back as I scanned the remaining corners of the room, "do you think it's truly over?" It felt wrong to celebrate when the weight of our past still lingered like smoke curling through the air. The tension returned, stronger than before, as shadows began to flit between cracks, dark figures waiting just beyond the veil, reminding us of their presence. Evelyn turned, a sudden flicker of worry clouding her face as she sensed what I felt. "I don't know," she admitted softly, eyes darting around us, searching for remnants of what we had just combated. "I thought we were free." But before we could process it further, the atmosphere thickened, the air turning electric and heavy, and I felt a familiar dread creep back in. A low whisper elongated in the corners, and just as a door creaked open, a chilling laugh echoed through the room, a sound both mocking and familiar, sending an icy blast against our skin. From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in shadows, face obscured but eerily recognizable. My heart sank, dread pooling in my stomach. "Did you think it would be that easy?" The figure sneered, voice menacing and laced with venom. The shadows behind it pooled as if breathing, pulsing like a heartbeat, an entity reborn from the manifestations we were convinced had been vanquished. I staggered back, battling the urge to flee as dread coiled tightly around me. "Who are you?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady when every fiber of my being screamed at me to run. The cloaked figure stepped closer, a malevolent grin forming beneath the dark veil, revealing eyes that glimmered with a remembered hatred. "I am the echo you thought silenced," it hissed, venom dripping from each word. "I am the memories you buried, the pain you refused to confront." My breath caught in my throat, and I glanced at Evelyn, seeing her resolve waver, uncertainty flickering like a candle in the wind. Together, we shared a profound understanding. The darkness never truly left us. It lurked beneath the surface, unyielding, feeding on our fears, waiting for the right moment to strike. With a deep breath, Evelyn took a step forward, radiating light in a world that felt suddenly cold and desolate. "Leave us," she cried, her voice steady, powered by the bond that had formed through our shared struggle. But the figure only chuckled, a sound that sliced through the air like a knife. "Do you really believe that light will drive me away?" It taunted, voice reverberating within the now-still attic. As it spoke, more shadows began to rise around us, swirling like a storm, spinning into a vortex of despair and anger, an insatiable tide hunting for our fears. "I know your fears," the figure said, its voice dark and melodic, weaving through the air like smoke. "Doubts that snake through your mind, memories you refuse to face." The shadows behind it danced menacingly, swirling in a grotesque ballet, and I felt a shiver right down my spine. "Who are you?" I managed to force out, my throat dry, heart pounding like a drum. But the figure only chuckled again, a sound that crawled up my skin like insects. "I am the consequence of your ignorance, the burden of unspoken truths." With each word, the atmosphere thickened, suffocating in its intensity, as if the very air were conspiring against us. Evelyn stood beside me, her radiance flickering as if trying to combat the ravenous shadows. "Stay close," I whispered, gripping her hand tight, but I could feel fear seeping into the cracks between our fingers. "I will," she replied, her voice steadied by courage, yet I could see the worry flicker behind her eyes. The shadowy figure stepped closer, its features sharpening for a moment before they melted back into obscurity. "Tell me, do you believe you can truly escape your past?" It gestured, and suddenly, the room faded around us, replaced by a whirlwind of recollections, flashes of pain and isolation swirling like a tempest directly within my mind. I felt my heartbeat accelerate, and the more I struggled to focus on a single thought, the more chaotic the memories became. I saw moments of loss, faces of loved ones, and the hollow ache of every dream I'd let slip away. Each image clawed at my heart, reminders of everything I had failed to protect. The shadows slithered around us, wrapping tighter, maliciously whispering, "You are nothing without us." I gritted my teeth, my resolve faltering as phantom echoes of despair cluttered my thoughts. "No!" I shouted, forcing the words through the darkness, and somehow I felt Evelyn's grip tighten around my hand in solidarity. "I'm not defined by what you take from me." The figure sneered, brows narrowing, and the shadows around it pulsated like a heartbeat, louder and angrier. "Is that what you want to believe? How noble. But deep down, you know the truth." With a flick of its wrist, the shadows erupted, revealing a twisted scene behind them. A reflection of past moments where I'd stood alone, powerless, watching as life continued without me. Each recollection was a knife, piercing through my chest, drawing out long-buried pain. "What do you want?" I shouted, anger and fear battling within my heart. "Do you really seek freedom, or are you just hiding from the truth?" The figure's words slipped under my skin, igniting a fury I didn't know I held. The laughter that followed rolled through the room, deep and mocking, as if it were a sadistic symphony celebrating my anguish. Evelyn stepped forward, her determination shining through the despair. "We can face the truth together," she declared, her voice cutting through the cacophony, a beacon amid the storm of shadows. "Or maybe you just want to cower in your own darkness." The figure recoiled slightly, its sneer faltering, revealing a flicker of uncertainty. "Electric words," it hissed, but the shadows shifted, the voices around us growing frantic. The atmosphere thickened, but I could feel the change, a crack forming in the oppressive veil, and I seized the moment. "Let me speak," I urged, taking a step forward, feeling the weight of the past pressing heavily on my shoulders, but unwilling to falter. "I have fought long enough against my own fears and regrets. I am done hiding." The shadows squirmed, and as I spoke, I felt a new determination surging through me, pushing against the pressure that grappled at my heart. "I won't allow you to control me anymore." With every word, I felt the light within me swell, pushing back the encroaching darkness, illuminating the corners that had long been neglected. Every loss has shaped who I am, made me stronger and more resolute. I continued, looking straight into the figure's concealed face, daring to challenge its malevolence. "And with each step I take, I will embrace those memories instead of fleeing from them." As I spoke, a shimmer broke through the shadows, light filtering through the edges, illuminating the anguished faces once hidden. They watched with eyes full of hope, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the weight of their pain lift slightly, as if they heard my words echoing in the vastness of the room. "Now you're starting to understand," the figure hissed, but there was a quiver of doubt in its voice, an uncertainty creeping into the edges of its dark silhouette. But before it could retaliate, I reached out, grasping Evelyn's hand with newfound strength. Together, we can uncover all of it. Memories, fears, everything. Invigorated, we stepped closer, drawing upon our shared light, illuminating the deepest corners of the room, dispelling the shadows that clung to the walls. I refused to be a prisoner of my past. At that moment, the figure reeled, its form flickering, shadows lashing out as it began to dissolve, but I summoned all the light within me for a final surge. "Face the truth," I cried, the words bursting forth like a tidal wave. obliterating the lingering darkness that sought to consume me. The shadows writhed, melting away under the beaming intensity of our light as the figure shrieked, twisting and turning in its attempt to escape. Evelyn and I held steadfast, our connection shining brightly, illuminating the whispers of pain in the air. The figure screamed, "You cannot escape. Your past is intertwined with mine." But as the light grew, pushing against the darkness with relentless force, its words faded into echoes, barely audible beneath the burgeoning warmth. And as if listening to our resolve, the room began to shift around us, the old walls morphing, revealing images of beauty amidst the pain. Moments of laughter, of love, and warmth rushed to the forefront, entwining with the shadows, weaving a tapestry of experiences that no longer felt burdensome. No, we embraced them. I shouted, the power of reclamation surging through me. We will learn from the past and rise. The shadows hissed one last time, a desperate wail that twisted around our hearts. But with one final flash of light, the room erupted in brilliance, engulfing everything in a wave of warmth and hope. In that instant, the oppressive weight shattered, sending ripples of clarity washing over us. The shadows dissolved into flurries of mist, dispersing into the ether, leaving an echo of peace behind. I turned to Evelyn, breathless from the surge of energy, and I could see the flicker of uncertainty still in her eyes. But it was mingled with the light of victory. We did it, she breathed, looking around the now unfamiliar space filled with warmth and hope. No more shadows, I whispered, feeling the weight of burden slip away, a lightness replacing it. But even as we stood there, a sense of lingering presence tucked itself within the corners of my mind. What had we awakened by facing the shadows? The blessing of liberation intertwined with the fear of what remained. What's next? I asked, uncertain now, the buzzing of adrenaline gradually fading, replaced by a creeping unease as I scanned the room. I don't know, Evelyn admitted, her voice trembling, but we need to be ready. This isn't over. And as those words fell between us, an icy breeze crawled through the room, a shiver of dread reigniting the pulse of awareness in my chest. The light began to weaken, shadows pooling back into the edges, flickers of darkness taunting us from beyond the veil of our newfound victory. An unsettling laughter reverberated once more, echoing ominously beneath the surface. I gripped Evelyn's hand tighter, the reality sinking in that what we had faced was merely a fraction of the darkness that laid in wait. Together, we had broken one chain, but the past had many hooks, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something deep within still remained to be confronted. We must stay vigilant, I said, a tremor of fear creeping back into my voice. And as if the air itself listened to our resolve, an eerie stillness enveloped the room, and a shadow seemed to flicker in the corner of my vision, refusing to be dismissed. Fingers of cold raked against my neck as I felt a presence looming, standing just out of sight. That lurking sensation was the harbinger of uncertainty, the hint of something still left unresolved. A figure began to materialize, a different silhouette from before, its form more menacing, outlined in tendrils of darkness. With a slow, deliberate movement, it turned towards us, a chilling grin stretching unnaturally across its face. "Did you really think it would end like this?" It taunted, a thick, serpentine voice that coiled around my thoughts, nudging at my deepest fears. Without thinking, every nerve in my body screamed for escape, and as the shadows spiraled around it, I felt Evelyn's presence beside me, a reassuring anchor amid chaos. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady, but I noticed the slight tremor in her grip. I drew in a breath, confronting the figure as best as I could, bracing for what lay ahead. "What do you want from us?" The figure laughed, the sound sending ripples of dread through my core. "Only what you owe," it replied, stepping further into the light that had begun to dim, darkness coiling back around it like a shroud. "What do we owe?" I questioned, my voice barely masking the tremor of fear. The figure grinned wider, eyes gleaming with purpose. "Everything you thought you buried," it hissed, and as it spoke, I felt the world around us begin to shift again, the clarity of our victory fading as layers of fog clouded my vision. It was no longer just a battle for light. It felt like we were stepping deeper into a labyrinth of shadows, each turn weaving tighter strands of pain and regret. As the darkness surged forward, I felt the grip of memories pulling me back into the tumult, a relentless tide dragging us into an abyss of fear. "Evelyn," I murmured, panic twisting my insides. "We cannot lose ourselves again." But when I turned toward her, I saw the shadows flickering across her face, and I knew the struggle wasn't just mine. The weight of our past was threatening to overtake us both, memories clawing at the edges of our consciousness, whispering savagely that escape was impossible. "Stay strong," we shouted back at the encroaching darkness, voices shouting back against the fear-drenched whispers. But as the shadows surged forward, they started to distort reality, pulling us into their chaotic embrace, memories flooding like a storm aimed to sweep us away. Together we faced the noise, murmuring affirmations against the nostalgia of pain, refusing to let the shadows consume us whole. "We are more than this," I urged, gathering whatever strength remained, as the laughter of the shadow reached a crescendo before darkness enveloped us once more. Time twisted and folded as the abyss opened wider, ready to swallow all that we fought for, dimming the light that had felt bright only moments before. And in that despair, a singular thought struck me, a flicker of revelation amid the chaos. "Evelyn, what if it's not about escaping? What if we have to confront it all?" Her eyes wide, the light slowly returning to their depths, we stood firm. Every fear, every regret, the darkness cannot bind us if we lay everything bare. As the shadows surged forward, we yelled a shared decree to whatever haunted us. We choose to face it. With a synchronizing pulse of courage, our voices resonated in unison, rippling through the inky veil. The shadows screamed, recoiling as our defiance lit the space between us, a blinding bolt illuminating the contours of despair. Light surged once more, reclaiming room and revealing the true nature of what had tormented us. It was rage, sorrow, and pain intertwined. Everything we had cast aside now stood before us, vulnerable and raw. And standing together, we faced the culmination of our fears, feeling the fullness of our history all at once, a powerful flood of understanding. Together, we cried, united in purpose, the power of our shared experiences igniting the air. We stood on the cusp of transformation, ready to pull apart the darkness stitch by stitch, weaving our way through the labyrinth illuminated by our resolve. The room erupted in light as we gripped each other tight, the echoes of screams fading away until only our unified strength remained, ringing triumphant. I could feel the energy swirling around us, growing thicker and more powerful. I sensed the shadows fighting against the light, squirming and writhing like trapped animals. Their cries were anguished, a cacophony forming a sorrowful melody that twisted my insides with fear. "We won't be afraid anymore. We are stronger together," I shouted, my voice echoing in the vacant space, pushing back against the dread that threatened to envelop us. Evelyn nodded, fear still dancing behind her eyes, but she held firm, her resolve a flicker of light amid the chaos. I watched as the shadows recoiled, flickering like candles in a tempest, their movements erratic and desperate. "What do you fear the most?" the dark figure hissed, its voice twisting through the air like smoke. It wasn't just asking, it was daring us, probing our vulnerabilities as if it could sense our hidden doubts. The darkness swirled around us, squeezing tighter, and I felt the rush of memories surge through my mind again. Days of loneliness, nights spent questioning my worth, and the suffocating weight of every failure I carried. But then, amidst all this pain, clarity washed over me. It dawned on me that facing these fears would be the key to our liberation. We fear the past, but we won't let it dictate our future, I declared, feeling the surge of courage swell within me like a tidal wave. The darkness screamed in return, a chorus of guttural growls echoing, reverberating against the attic walls. In that moment, I recognized the struggle that so many had faced, and the shadows were nothing but manifestations of our past, a tangled collection of wounds unhealed. "We will free ourselves," I yelled, and the shadows seemed to pause, as if weighing my words. With the intensity of my declaration, I stepped forward, determined to reclaim every moment that had once made me feel small. "Every scar," I continued, "every regret, I hold them all. They belong to me, but they do not define me." Evelyn squeezed my hand, and I could feel her strength pouring into me, fueling the fire inside. The figure before us twisted, the rage rising in its darkness, almost intoxicating, as if it fed off my words. "No, you will not escape," it screeched, lunging toward us, shadows shooting from its form like arrows. Suddenly, they morphed into horrifying shapes, wild faces of despair, features twisted in anger, mouths screaming silently, reaching for us with bony fingers. My heart raced as I recognized one of the faces, someone I mourned long ago, their eyes filled with sorrow, staring back at me. The visage of my lost friend brought a wave of grief crashing down, memories of laughter now tinged with sorrow. "Do not listen," Evelyn shouted at my side, her voice slicing through my reverie. "Remember the joy. Remember the love." Her words were a lifeline, a tether that anchored me amidst the deluge of grief. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to center myself, focusing on the warmth of our shared light. "I remember the happiness we built together," I said, heart racing, summoning courage. The shadows writhed, faces distorting further in agony, hungry for the lingering pain we fought to cast aside. "We hold the power to transform this darkness," I shouted, breathless, feeling everything collide, the light and the shadows, sorrow and hope, pain and healing. But the figure didn't yield. "I will show you the depths of your despair," it hissed, lunging forward, the shadows erupting in a whirlwind that tugged at the edges of my mind. Suddenly, I found myself standing in that dark, suffocating alley from my past, the walls closing in, echoing whispers of my failures. The environment pulsed with memories that felt all too real, voices taunting me, reminding me of when I was left alone, abandoned, vulnerable, and searching for solace that never came. I could almost feel the rough texture of the cold bricks against my back, the suffocating gloom swirling just beyond the light. But I refused to let despair swallow me whole. "I'm still here," I shouted, peeling myself away from those memories, retracing steps in my mind. I survived. Each affirmation pushed back against the encroaching dread, and the world began to fracture. The dark alley, the shadows, they all splintered under the weight of my resolve. It was as if I was clutching a thread of reality, weaving it tighter, each memory stitching together a tapestry of survival, strength, and growth. The figure shrieked, disintegrating before my eyes, pushed back by the radiant energy emanating from Evelyn and me. We had a choice, to live in the past or to break free. With every heartbeat, I embraced my choices. The pain that had shaped me became lighter, manageable, reminders of resilience rather than something to fear. "I will not be defined by my failures," I bellowed, riding the wave of newfound strength. And suddenly, the shadows began to dissolve, an unsettling sense of freedom burgeoning as light cascaded into the room, illuminating every corner, driving back the darkness that had once held us hostage. But just as the light surged, a chilling wind swept through, cutting across our skin like shards of glass, sending icy tendrils creeping into our hearts. A new terror loomed, unfurling in the corners of my vision. A different shadow was rising, thicker and darker than before. I turned, the room spinning as the last remnants of light slipped away. This shadow held a weight of malice, swirling with whispers full of contempt and secrets yet unearthed. It slithered toward us, its presence suffocating, wrapping itself around my heart in a vice grip. "Did you think you could escape me?" It crooned, voice dripping with demonic delight. As it spoke, I felt icy fingers graze my neck, trailing along my skin like a lover's touch, the sensation both horrifying and mesmerizing. It beckoned me closer, offering promises of power buried beneath the pain, and I stumbled back, grappling with the temptation it presented. "Don't listen," Evelyn cried, pulling me closer to her, her grip a lifeline against the seductive pull of the shadow. But as I fought against it, the entity let out a laugh that seeped into my bones, echoing with cruel assurance. "Face it, you belong to the darkness." It reached out, its tendrils teasing across my mind, making me question the very fabric of my resolve. Shadows from the past began to materialize around us. Scenes of betrayal, moments in which trust shattered like glass, feelings of abandonment carved deeply into my existence. "Look at what you've lost," the shadow continued, its voice an intoxicating whisper that curled around the flowers of my heart, suffocating them. "Do you not yearn for the power to command your pain?" Caught in the grip of its influence, I shook my head, trying to dispel the deceptive allure. "No, I choose light. I choose love," I yelled, my voice shaking but determined. We faced the shadow together, a united front against the dense fog of despair, pushing with everything we had left. The radiant strength ignited between us, pulsing like a heartbeat, and the shadow screeched, wavering as if my words burned through it. But even as the darkness receded, a gnawing fear gnawed at me, an unsettling thought slithering through my mind. What if we weren't strong enough? What if it consumes us instead? I thought, terror gripping my heart and threatening to fracture our resolve. Evelyn sensed my doubt, and without hesitation, she whispered, "We are stronger than we know." Her words rang clear, powerful against the dark, pushing forward like a shield. I refused to be a victim anymore, I chanted, forcing myself to breathe through the rising panic, recalling every moment that had led me here, everything I had fought for, everything that mattered. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of despair echoing back at us, tearing at our souls. But the connection between Evelyn and me shimmered, a tether built on shared strength. "No matter how dark, we will shine." As I spoke, the last remnants of light surged within me, flooding the space with a warmth that staved off the encroaching darkness. The shadows writhed, but we possessed the power to dispel them. Holding tightly to our light, we surged forward, rebuffed the dark, determined to reclaim our choices and confront the haunting shadows that tempted us to turn back. But just as we surged ahead, a loud crack oscillated through the air, sending tremors reverberating through the walls, and the room seemed to shatter as if splitting reality itself. My heart raced as I grasped at the air, battle-ready for whatever lay ahead, my thoughts racing with sheer determination. The cacophony of chaos erupted into a storm, swirling us once more into chaos, back into the depths of memories I feared might consume me whole. Every heartbeat pulsed with urgency, tethering me to reality as I scanned my surroundings, caught up in the dance of light and dark once more. What awaited us beyond this tumult? Suddenly, it wouldn't just be the shadows we faced. It would be the truth we both needed to accept. A sharp gasp caught in my throat as I understood. Recognition flooded through the oppressive atmosphere. Whatever truths lay ahead were mine to confront. The overwhelming darkness surged forward, but now, standing side by side, Evelyn and I prepared to face it, undeterred and resolute in our determination. We had come this far, and together, we would not falter now. The darkness pressed closer, its tendrils curling around my ankles, eager to drag me back into the depths of despair. I felt cold fingers grazing my skin, whispering haunting promises that sent chills racing along my spine. Shadows twisted and curled, morphing into horrifying shapes. Faces emerged from the void, eyes wide with terror, mouths open in silent screams. Each one was a fragment of the regrets I carried, a reminder of nights spent alone, drowning in anguish and self-doubt. "Evelyn," Can you see them? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath, trying to see the fear etched on her face. The shadows danced, their movements chaotic, but my determination surged like a tide, pushing the fear back. I had to pull her away from the grasp of the darkness as much as I needed to free myself. I see them, she responded, her voice steady despite the terror swirling around us. The air was thick with sorrow, but I knew this was our moment to confront our demons. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped forward, forcing my way into the heart of the encroaching shadows. You are nothing compared to what we've overcome, I shouted, summoning the strength of every wound that had scarred me. Each painful memory fueled my fire, layering my resolve with resilience. Face your truth, the shadow snarled back, its voice a cacophony of tortured sounds that echoed like thunder against the walls, shaking me to my core. Suddenly, the ground beneath us quaked violently, and I stumbled as the darkness twisted around Evelyn, pulling her closer to the heart of despair. Evelyn, I cried out, fear gripping my chest. I lunged forward, grasping her hand tightly, the warmth of our connection igniting a flicker of light. She met my gaze, and despite the chaos, I saw a spark of determination in her eyes. We can break free, she yelled, and I felt the surge of energy flow between us. We pulled against the shadows, fighting against the inevitable pull of grief and regret. I could hear the whispers growing louder, trying to seep into my mind. You are weak. You will never escape what you are, they taunted, the voices melding into a chorus of despair that threatened to drown out our resolve. I am stronger than this past, I defended, pressing forward, dragging Evelyn with me, each step like a battle against the weight of despair. The shadows roared with rage, thrashing against us, yet our light pulsed with growing intensity, illuminating the room, forcing the darkness to retreat momentarily. But the moment of relief was fleeting. From the core of the shadows, a figure began to materialize, larger than the others, looming over us like a dark god. Its eyes glowed with malice, and I could feel its predatory gaze piercing through me, digging into my soul, exposing every insecurity and fear like splintered wood. You thought it would be that easy? It sneered, mocking us. You still have much to learn. You are mere children in the face of true darkness. I felt the breath leave my lungs as it extended an arm, fingers curling like claws, aiming right for my chest. The air crackled with tension, and panic surged through me. I couldn't let it sink its claws into me. We will face you, I shouted defiantly, clutching Evelyn's hand tighter, the light between us pulsing with electric energy that pushed back against the malevolence. But as I stood there, a dreadful realization weighed upon my heart. The darkness thrived on fear and loneliness. It knew how to exploit every chink in our armor. Just then, the shadows surged forward, swirling violently, unraveling truths I had buried deep within myself. Visions erupted around me, memories replaying like a nightmarish film reel. My childhood home, dimly lit, filled with echoes of broken laughter and screams of what could have been. I stood frozen, caught in a moment of despair. Why can't you let go? The looming figure taunted, its voice a venomous hiss slithering into my mind, echoing with deep betrayal. Fingers trembling, I grasped my temple, wrestling with the memories clawing at my thoughts. I recalled endless nights punctuated by uncertainty, self-loathing that seeped into my veins, the feeling of never being enough, of never living up to the expectations placed upon me. You are trapped, it mocked. This is your reality. You cannot escape the truth buried in your heart. My breath quickened as the pressure mounted, the shadows tightening their grip, taunting me with images of lost opportunities. But then, like a whisper of wind in a suffocating room, Evelyn's voice reached me, a lifeline amidst the chaos. You are not alone, she cried out, pulling me back, and I could feel the warmth of her hand, anchoring me to the light breaking through. We are not victims of our past, I repeated in my head, summoning every ounce of strength to brush away the shadows lingering at the edges of my mind. Every scar tells a story, I said fiercely, my voice breaking through the cacophony. I own my past, but it doesn't own me. The dark figure jerked back, visibly shaken, and for a fleeting moment, uncertainty flickered in its eyes. But the shadows still writhed and lunged at us, relentless, each one trying to drag us deeper into the abyss. Together, we can do this, I shouted, feeling the newfound strength radiate from Evelyn. She stepped forward, directly confronting the looming figure, her resolve a beacon of light that intensified. You're nothing without our fear. We will stand and fight. The shadows hissed, an angry swarm trying to smother her words. But our unity pushed against the encroaching void. Every heartbeat matched in sync, a rhythm of defiance against the haunting truths that had sought to destroy us. As Evelyn and I channeled our strength, the shadows began to retract, twisting and contorting as light pierced through their malice. The air vibrated with raw energy, electrifying, and suddenly everything felt as if it hung in the balance. Face this, I roared, throwing my hands out wide, letting go of every hurt that had once held me captive. I release you. In that moment, the shadows recoiled, the pulse of light expanding between us surged, and I could see the dark figure contorting, its form flickering like a dying flame. But just before it vanished, I caught a glimpse of its true form. The reflection of my own fears twisted and distorted, an ugly representation of self-doubt that I had long fought to bury. Just as the light reached its peak, the darkness roared one last time, the sound echoing like thunder. You may escape me now, it shrieked, but I felt the confidence swell within me. But I will always return, and like a mist, it evaporated, drifting away into the ether, leaving me with the echo of its threat lurking just beneath the surface of my thoughts. Though victory was ours for the moment, I knew that shadows were never truly gone. The light began to settle in the room as we stood there, panting, hearts racing, knowing that while we had faced our past in this powerful confrontation, the battle for our future lay ahead. I swept my gaze around the dimly lit space, the remnants of the shadows dissipating into the corners of the room, but a lingering unease twisted in my stomach. What other truths lay hidden, waiting in the darkness for the right moment to strike? Could I trust myself not to falter again? They will come back, I whispered, uncertainty creeping back into my mind. Evelyn nodded, her expression resolute but tinged with a hint of apprehension. We have to be ready, she replied. This isn't over. And with those words, a chilling anticipation gripped my heart, sensing that the darkness might return, gathering its strength, biding its time before striking once more. I took a deep breath, forcing the doubt aside, focusing on the light that burned between us. Yes, we will be ready, I affirmed, recalling how far we'd come, the light of our unity bright against the lingering darkness. But as the shadows faded further, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deep in the room still resonated. A throbbing pulse of unresolved fear whispered in the air, a warning echoing through time. Let's go. With cautious determination, we turned to leave, stepping into the light that guided us forward. But I felt a sinister presence lingering at our backs, an unseen watcher lurking, waiting to pounce on our every move, perhaps even grasping the thread of our shared victory. As I glanced back one last time, a chill ran down my spine. Somewhere amid the shadows, I could have sworn I saw a pair of glowing eyes watching, hungry for the chance to snuff out our light. As we stepped into the hallway, a suffocating silence enveloped us. It was as if the shadows had seeped into the very walls, each echoing footstep swallowed by the thick air. I glanced sideways at Evelyn, her face pale, eyebrows knitted with worry. For a moment, I wished I could reach out and reassure her, but a weight in my stomach held me back. What if it's waiting? I murmured, my voice barely breaking the stillness. The shadows hadn't vanished. They merely retreated, lulling us into a false sense of security. Fear crept back into my mind, swirling like smoke, wrapping around my confidence. Memories of the looming figure clawed at my thoughts, whispering fragments of doubt that resonated with the fear circling the room with us. Without warning, a low, rumbling laugh echoed down the hallway, reverberating off the walls like thunder. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. Evelyn's eyes widened, reflecting the same horror I felt crawling up my spine. Before I could react, the hall seemed to shift. The light flickered, shadows lengthening and twisting as if they were alive, grasping at the very foundations of our resolve. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. She nodded slowly. Fear etched on her features, and I felt a chill seep deeper into my bones. "We need to keep moving," she urged, but her voice trembled, revealing the cracks in her bravery. As we hurried forward, the walls around us pulsated, almost breathing, warping in the fluorescent flicker of the lights. The air thickened with an uneasy energy, weighty and foreboding, and I could sense we were being watched, not only by the eyes in the shadows, but by something older, something that knew how to exploit our fear. A glimmer of movement caught my attention, a shadow darting across the periphery of my vision. I turned quickly, but it vanished like mist in the wind. "Did you see that?" I gasped, heart racing, palms clammy. "What?" "See what?" she asked nervously, scanning the dim hallway with wide, unblinking eyes. "Just something," I stammered, the unease clawing at my throat. We pressed on, the faint sound of giggles bouncing eerily off the walls, disembodied voices weaving in and out of our senses. The laughter wasn't joyful. It echoed like a taunt, mocking our fragile courage as we ventured deeper into the abyss of uncertainty. "Stay close to me," I whispered, gripping her hand tighter, the warmth of her presence grounding me. But deep down, a nagging fear pulsated, a feeling that no matter how tightly I held on, the darkness would find a way to unravel our connection. Suddenly, a door creaked open just ahead. The sound was almost deafening in the stillness, a whisper of invitation laced with danger. I glanced at Evelyn, our eyes locking in silent agreement. Curiosity drove us forward, pulling us toward the unknown. As we stepped into the room, the atmosphere shifted drastically. It felt colder, the air thick with an invisible weight that made it hard to breathe. The pale light flickered overhead, creating unsettling shadows that danced along the walls, and I stepped back instinctively, heart racing. A sense of wrongness hung heavy in the air. What lay on the floor sent icy fingers of dread spiraling down my spine. Broken mirrors, scattered like shattered dreams, reflected distorted images of ourselves, twisting our features into nightmarish shapes. Some of the glass held images of moments from our past, each one darker than the last. I saw myself alone, isolated in a dark room, haunted by the ghosts of my regrets. Every missed opportunity flashing before my eyes, every disappointment rising to suffocate me. I drew a sharp breath, backing away slowly. "What is this place?" I asked, but my voice trembled with disbelief. "Maybe it's a trap," Evelyn replied, just above a whisper, scanning the eerily silent room, every muscle in her body tense. Before I could respond, a shattering sound echoed through the air as one of the mirrors cracked open, the jagged shards glinting like teeth in the dim light. An icy breeze rolled through the room, carrying with it the scent of decay, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run. But then I saw it. Something emerging from the shattered glass, gliding smoothly across the floor like liquid shadow. A figure began to take shape, its features indistinguishable but radiating malice. "Stay back!" I screamed, instinctively stepping in front of Evelyn, my heart pounding with fear. The figure paused, its form wavering as if it were made of smoke and night, shifting in and out of focus. Dark eyes glowed back at me, an insatiable hunger lingering in their depths. "You think you can escape?" It hissed, its voice a chilling caress. I could feel the sheer malevolence wrapping around us, like a predator toying with its prey. And then it came closer, shadows coiling around it like snakes, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. The air thickened with dread, the mirrors reflecting even more shapes, showing the past, the mistakes I had tried to bury deep within me. Horrified, I stumbled back, feeling the weight of each regret settle on my chest like a stone. "I surrender. Just leave us alone," I shouted, panicking. But the figure only grinned wider, revealing teeth sharp as knives, glistening in the dim light. "Do you really think you can bargain with the darkness?" it crooned, voice dripping with amusement. In that moment, I realized it thrived on my fear, on our doubts, our regrets. A jolt of defiance surged through me. "No!" I shouted, clenching my fists. "You have no power over me." Evelyn stepped beside me, and together, we summoned the light from our shared strength, releasing it into the cold air, illuminating the corners of the room as if we were holding our own stars. The figure recoiled, a howl of rage filling the room as the shadows shrank back and the mirrors flickered with intensity. But I knew I had to confront the darkness head-on. I couldn't cower in fear any longer. As I locked eyes with the shadow, I found myself staring into the depths of my own past. The very moments that had haunted me, leading me here, were now laid bare before us. "What is it you want?" I asked, my voice stronger than before. With a cruel laugh, it answered, "I want you to remember." A low rumble of thunder echoed outside, sending tremors through the building. In that instant, the ground began to shake violently beneath our feet, and I felt Evelyn falter beside me. Holding her hand tighter, I shouted, "We stand united. You can't break us." The walls buckled as shadows lashed out, reaching for us, desperate to drag us into the depths of despair. The mirrors shattered, glass flying in every direction, filled with the echoes of our past, sharp like daggers. I could hear the whispers rising in intensity, a tempest of voices clawing at my mind. "You're not strong enough. You can't win. You'll always be alone." But amidst the chaos, a voice of clarity arose within me, cutting through the confusion. "I have always had the power," I declared, each word a hammer against the mounting fear. The figure lurched, shadows swirling violently around it, as if my declaration burned its essence. With a sudden burst of light, I unleashed the energy between us, a blinding force that pierced through the darkness, illuminating every corner and banishing the shadows into nothingness. As the brilliance enveloped us, I felt weightlessness, the bonds of despair snapping like fragile threads. But even as we triumphed, a whisper remained, a last haunting echo deep in my mind, unsettling and unnervingly familiar. "Remember me?" I turned, but the figure had already vanished, leaving behind a room filled with shards glimmering in the dying light, each one holding a piece of my past, the weight of memories pressing heavy against my heart. What had just happened? Evelyn and I stood in the broken room, breathing heavily as the atmosphere began to settle, the last echoes of the storm fading into an uneasy silence. "What do you think it meant?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. "I don't know," I replied, shaking but trying to gather my thoughts. But deep down, I could feel it, the lingering sense of something unresolved, a darkness hiding just beneath the surface of our victory. We weren't safe yet. The lingering weight of eyes watching us, the knowledge that we had merely disrupted the darkness without vanquishing it, prickled at my skin. As we stepped cautiously forward, the door creaked ominously in the distance, beckoning us into the next room, promising both salvation and danger. What's beyond the door? I wondered aloud, unease coiling in my stomach like a snake, and in the silence that followed, the air thickened once more with uncertainty. Evelyn stepped closer, her hand finding mine again. "Whatever it is, we face it together," she said, her voice unwavering. With determination, I nodded, pushing aside the shadows of doubt flickering along the edges of my mind, and together, we moved closer to the door, bracing ourselves for whatever awaited us beyond. But deep down, a whisper echoed softly, a promise of darkness that lingered, lurking just outside the light, waiting for us to let our guard down again. "Let's go," I murmured, summoning the last remnants of courage left within me, ready to face whatever lay ahead. With one final breath, we stepped into the unknown, hearts racing in unison, ready to confront not just the darkness around us, but the shadows within ourselves. As the door creaked open, a chill swept over me, its icy breath tangling in my hair and wrapping around my neck like a noose. I hesitated, heart pounding hard against my ribs, fighting against the primal urge to turn and run. Evelyn stepped in front of me, her eyes wide and glimmering with a mixture of fear and determination. "We can't turn back," she urged, her voice steadying me even as the shadows swirled behind us, tugging at our heels. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the threshold, the air thick with an unnameable dread that crawled beneath my skin. The lighting in the room was dim, flickering sporadically as if trying to shed light on the sinister remnants of what once was. Old wallpaper peeled away, revealing dark stains that twisted like grotesque faces, watching us with silent expressions of woe and malice. The room felt alive, pulsing gently, as if beneath the floorboards, a dark heart beat steadily, waiting and watching. In the corner, a dusty old rocking chair swayed back and forth, the wood groaning softly as if it remembered the weight of someone long gone. I glanced at Evelyn, and her lips parted slightly in shock. "It's just a chair," I whispered, yet I knew this place was anything but ordinary. As I moved deeper into the room, the air grew thicker, the atmosphere saturated with a lingering sense of sorrow. Faded photographs lined the walls, each one black and white, showing faces that twisted into expressions of despair. I found my eyes drawn to one in particular, a young girl with hollow eyes, tilting her head as if aiming to speak, her mouth stretched into a faint, eerie smile. "Who are they?" I asked, but Evelyn couldn't answer. She seemed entranced, caught in the web of sorrow woven into the very air we breathed. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushed through the room, sending papers fluttering everywhere, filling the space with whispers that sounded like desperate pleas. The words twisted around us, barely discernible, yet their weight pressed down on my chest, suffocating me under their intensity. I stepped back instinctively, colliding with something solid behind me. It felt like a wall, but the sensation was different, almost like skin, heart racing. I turned slowly to see what lurked in the shadows, only to find an empty corner looming, heavy and silent. Yet I sensed it desperately wanting to speak. "Stay away from that," Evelyn warned, her voice trembling slightly as she pointed to a dark shape that seemed to ripple within the corner. My curiosity fought against the surge of dread. I felt some kind of presence lurking there, a pull that both frightened and fascinated me. "But I need to know what it is," I whispered, more to myself than to her. The shadows around it became alive, flickering and writhing like 1,000 worms, revealing the jagged edges of some unknown horror lurking just outside our grasp. "No, don't," she urged, but her words slipped away as the shape began to elongate, rising into a tall, indistinct figure that twisted and contorted, ever so slightly. The air grew heavy with silence as I took a hesitant step closer, the sorrow in the room tangling with fear, wrapping around my throat like a vice. The figure solidified, an outline appearing, a face forming, though not one I recognized. It was a man, but his features were obscured, a dark shroud enveloping him, blocking out the light. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped, voice echoing off the walls, chilling my bones. I stumbled backward, my heart racing as my pulse echoed in my ears. A frantic rhythm coordinated with my rising panic. "Who are you?" I could barely manage to ask, the words catching painfully in my throat. "An echo of your past," he replied, laughter spilling from his lips like venom, swirling around us and settling in the crevices of the shadows. "You still haven't learned. What you fear the most is often what you invite in." Suddenly, the photographs on the wall began to shift. The faces twisted further, distorting into grimaces that screamed silently, pleading for something I couldn't understand. The laughter morphed into wails, amplifying the atmosphere of despair, pushing against me with an overwhelming force. "Evelyn," I cried, reaching for her as the weight of the room grew heavier, the shadows closing in around us like hungry wolves. But she stood frozen, her eyes darting between the figure and the photographs, trapped in some nightmarish spell that threatened to tear us apart. "It's too late for you," the figure hissed, eyes glinting like shards of obsidian. "Too late for all of us." With a chilling laugh, he extended a bony hand toward me, shadows stretching from his fingertips, fingers clawing like a hungry beast yearning to drag me back into the depths of the unknown. I could feel the grasp of the shadows tightening around my ankles, icy tendrils clutching at my legs, pulling me closer to the dark heart of the room. "No!" I shouted, summoning every ounce of strength within me, my voice ringing out amidst the chaos like a battle cry. "This ends now." Evelyn broke from her trance, her expression morphing into horror as the shapes around us twisted with our escalating fear, growing darker, more potent. "We need to fight back," she yelled, grasping my arm as the dark figure writhed, thrashing under the pressure of our defiance. Together, we summoned our light, a vibrant force sparked by our shared resolve, as it erupted like a supernova, emanating from us in vibrant waves. It pushed against the shadows, illuminating the distorted faces in the photographs, sending them screaming back into the darkness, unable to withstand the brightness that erupted between us. The figure howled in rage. "You think you can extinguish me with mere light? I don't think I know." I roared back, heart pounding, as the light swelled around us, forging a protective barrier that drove back the darkness, filling the room with warmth that chased away the bitter cold. But as I stood my ground, I felt the undercurrents of the room shift once again. The walls began to pulse as if resonating with the darkness we confronted, and an awful sound echoed behind me, a cracking that resonated like bones breaking. "Do you think you can escape this place?" the figure screeched, and with his words, the walls began to close in, the room transforming into a nightmarish labyrinth. The shadows blurred my vision, the flickering lights casting grotesque shapes that lurked just out of reach. "Evelyn," I screamed, dread making my voice tremble. "Over here," she called urgently, pointing to a narrow corridor revealed in the shadows. Without a second thought, I sprinted toward her, deliberately pulling her by the hand. We dashed into the corridor, walls shifting around us as the darkness writhed and roared behind us, a cacophony of anger echoing in our wake. But just as we plunged forward, the corridor twisted and warped, and suddenly we were no longer alone. Dark figures emerged from the walls, their faces nothing more than deep voids, hollows that echoed with the sorrows of 1,000 lost souls. "Let us in," they whispered, their voices a dissonant choir that sent chills racing down my spine. "No!" I shouted, pushing through sheer panic. "We're not yours to claim." But with that proclamation, they surged forward, shadows crashing like waves against the coast, hungry and relentless. The weight of their collective despair threatened to smother us as we ran, the figures closing in, their cold fingers brushing against my arms, pulling me back into the depths of their sorrow. "Keep going," Evelyn urged, her voice rising above the whispers, growing desperate as she felt the weight of the shadows snare her. Just ahead, a flicker of light shimmered in a doorway, promising safety beyond. "There! We can make it!" I exclaimed, adrenaline surging as I grasped her hand tighter, willing every fiber of my being to push forward. But the shadows erupted around us, clawing and reaching, desperate to reclaim us, whispers growing louder and more coherent, echoing my greatest fears. "You cannot escape. You are forever bound." "No!" I yelled defiantly, focusing with all my strength on the light ahead. We burst through the doorway, stumbling into a new room that felt both familiar and foreign. It was filled with mirrors, tall and imposing. Each one shimmered, casting fractured reflections of ourselves, our fears materializing in distorted shapes and agonizing forms. In the center stood an obsidian pedestal, enveloped in shadows that swirled like a storm, whispering secrets of despair. The towering mirrors trembled as I locked eyes with my own reflection, a distorted reminder of everything I fought to escape. But behind me, I could hear the chilling echoes of the figures diving into the light, their hollow whispers filling the air. "You cannot fight it. It is within you forever," they intoned in unison, their voices blending seamlessly. Gripping Evelyn's hand tightly, I turned back to the mirrors, now reflecting not only our forms but the shadows we carried within our hearts. I felt a stirring, a sense of something buried deep, clawing to the surface. "They want us to surrender," I murmured, looking into the rich depths of the reflections. "This isn't just a fight against them," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "It's a fight against ourselves." And suddenly, I could feel the darkness swirling within me, rising to the surface. I took a deep breath, letting the fear wash through me, but refusing to let it control me. "No more," I said fiercely, my voice ringing out against the shadows closing in. The mirrors flickered, shadows dancing in a frantic frenzy as the figures closed in. "Give in to us," they whispered, their voices like ice. "You could be free." What they offered was an escape, yet I knew it came with a price. I glanced at Evelyn, her eyes shining with the same flicker of defiance. "Together," she urged gently, squeezing my hand. "So we confront it together," I affirmed. The shadows roared, their fury boiling over. But I stood firm, drawing on the combined strength of our spirits. "You have no power here," I shouted, letting the light inside me roar to life, pushing against the shadows, smothering everything in darkness. As we summoned our collective strength, I felt the warmth welling up within me, a radiant light piercing through the suffocating gloom, illuminating the mirrors around us. The figures shrieked, shadows recoiling as the light expanded, filling every corner. In this moment, I understood. The fight wasn't to banish the darkness, but to embrace the light within, acknowledging the shadows that had clung to my soul for so long. "I am more than my fears," I declared, and the mirrors reflected the truth of my words back at me, the darkness swirling, slowly retreating, revealing beams of brilliance shining through cracks of sorrow. But even as I felt the surge of triumph, I sensed a shadow lingering deep within the heart of the obsidian pedestal, still swirling with malice, waiting patiently. The battle was far from over. This was merely the beginning. "This is not the end," the whispers warned, a chilling echo reverberating through the room. Standing with Evelyn, I knew that the real fight lay ahead, a war between light and shadows, and I wasn't ready to surrender just yet. "We're not backing down," I said resolutely, preparing to face whatever darkness awaited us. As the shadows swirled around us, promising temptations and nightmares yet unseen, I tightened my grip, feeling the warmth of our light rise higher, ready to plunge deeper into the unknown, to confront every demon that lay ahead. Stepping forward together, we plunged into the heart of the darkness, united against the shadows that sought to consume us, driven by the fire of our determination. I would not let them claim us. Not now. Not ever. As we stepped deeper into the shadows, the pulsing energy around us shifted. I could feel it, an electric charge in the air. The darkness felt alive, breathing in tandem with my own racing heart, whispering sinister secrets that beckoned me closer. Every step pierced through the silence, the echoes haunting and unnerving, while the oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on my chest. The ground beneath my feet began to pulse in a strange rhythm, echoing the energy that swirled around us. My eyes darted to the edges of the room, drawn to grotesque figures that flickered in and out of existence like poorly framed paintings. They twisted and contorted, mimicking the pain and suffering of countless souls who had walked this nightmare long before me. "Don't look at them," Evelyn's voice broke through, sharp and urgent as she pulled me back. "They feed off your fear," but it was too late. The faint glimmers of one's past, forever trapped within the walls of this cursed place, wrung my emotions dry. I was captivated and horrified, torn between the need to comprehend the shadows and the instinct to flee. My breath quickened, heart pounding, as I felt the weight of their despair pressing upon me like a physical force. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind us, piercing the unnatural hush. My body tensed, instinct screaming at me to turn around. As I glanced back, I saw the dark figure prowling, hunched low, its face twisted in rage as it broke through the barriers we'd once thought were safe. The shadows churned and roiled, filling the space with an oppressive heat that enveloped my skin. I could feel something clawing at my mind, a darkness, a whisper, creeping deeper into my thoughts. "You can't run from what you are," it hissed, the tone fluid and mocking. It danced through my fears, wrapping around every regret and failure, attempting to crack the veneer of courage we had just forged. "No!" I shouted, clenching my fists, forcing the nightmares back. I was not done fighting. The flickering light within me ignited, fueling my resistance, and I felt Evelyn's hand grip mine tighter, sharing our strength. Together, we were a beacon against the encroaching dark. The ground shifted ominously, breaking beneath especially heavy footsteps. I stumbled, staring wide-eyed as the shadows twisted into monstrous shapes that lunged toward us. They reached out with grasping fingers, desperate to reclaim what they had lost. In that moment of vulnerability, I understood that these shadows were not just remnants of my past. They were alive with the anguish of those who had faced the same torment before me. Figures from the mirrors glided through the air, their tortured expressions twisted in silent screams, desperately trying to escape their own prison. Abruptly, a strobe of light erupted from the ceiling, illuminating a corner where a figure stood, half merged with the wall. Its features were familiar, yet horrific, a perfect blend of past and present. It was me, but distorted, a reflection carved from my deepest fears. Eyes wide and hollow, the reflection looked back at me with a haunting grin, taunting me with glimpses of failures I had buried deep. "This is what you truly are," it whispered, voice velvety yet laced with malice. "One wrong step, and you'll be just like us." I felt my heart drop, terror gripping me like a vice. "No," I gasped, summoning every ounce of willpower. "I won't give in." "Your defiance is amusing," it hissed, advancing through the shadows, the darkness around it rippling like liquid ink. "But it won't change your fate." In that moment, the world blurred around me as dark tendrils shot from the being like serpents, lashing out to ensnare my limbs. I resisted, throwing myself against Evelyn, who steadied me with a fierce look of determination. "Stay strong. We need to find a way out." The room around us began to tremble, lights flickering in rapid bursts, echoing my rising panic. Liquefying shadows melted against the walls, revealing doorways that seemed to warp and twist into grotesque shapes, threatening to devour us whole. "Those are distractions," Evelyn shouted over the cacophony, her voice a solid anchor in the chaos. "Focus on the light." With a nod, I turned my attention inward. I called on the warmth brewing deep within me, envisioning a radiant blaze that could banish the darkness lurking in every corner. With each heartbeat, the glow intensified, radiating from my chest like a sun breaking through dark, stormy skies. Fueled by my resolve, I spread out my arms, embracing the very light I summoned, forcing it outward. The shadows shuddered, pulling back from the intensity. I could feel their anguish weighing heavy on my heart, but I refused to let it overwhelm me. The room shook violently, as if caught in the throes of a great storm. Suddenly, I saw it, a door glimmering in the far corner, its surface shimmering like silver in a moonlit night. "Over there!" I shouted, pointing toward the door, my heart racing with hope. Evelyn and I sprinted toward it, dodging the tendrils that lashed out with wild fury. As I reached for the handle, it disintegrated into mist, reforming into something more sinister. The door melted away, revealing a vast, starless expanse, a void stretching endlessly into darkness, where nothingness twisted like a living entity. "Don't look!" I screamed, but as I tried to pull back, the shadows surged forward, grasping at my body with icy fingers that felt like fire. "Let me go!" I bellowed, but the grip tightened, pulling me closer to the threshold. I could hear the cries of those who had come before me, echoing from the void, begging to be freed from their eternal prison. I closed my eyes, pushing against the panic that threatened to consume me. "We are stronger than this," I shouted, drawing on the warmth that pulsed within me. Suddenly, a sudden surge of power erupted from our connection as Evelyn squeezed my hand tighter, the light bursting forth with blinding intensity. With a primal scream of defiance, we thrust the darkness aside, seizing the last remnants of our hope and thrusting it into the void. The shadows howled in fury, a cacophony of anguish and rage erupting around us as they began to spiral away from the door. The figures twisted upon themselves, their mouths moving in silence as if screaming in despair, ripping free from the chains of the darkness. As the door lay wide open before us, a glimmer of light spilled from within, pushing the tendrils of shadows back, illuminating the path ahead. A gust of warm air washed over us, brushing against my cheek and intoxicating my senses. I felt a surge of exhilaration. "We need to go," Evelyn urged, her voice breaking through the lingering echoes of despair. Without a moment's hesitation, we dashed through the threshold, surrendering to the warmth that engulfed us as we stepped forward, leaving everything else behind. But as I crossed over, I turned back briefly, a chill running down my spine as I glimpsed the shadows retreating into the void, encroaching ever closer. It was a temporary reprieve, and I knew, deep down, that the darkness wouldn't let us go that easily. "Where are we?" I asked, trying to orient myself in this new space. The room we entered felt different. The air was thick with memories and echoes of laughter that felt disjointed, almost ghostly. It was as if we had stumbled into a playground, yet the grass beneath our feet was gray and wilted, announcing that joy had long since fled. A rusted swing swayed slowly, creaking ominously with every motion. I hesitated, feeling a wave of apprehension wash over me. The air was charged with a strange energy, amplifying the eerie sensations. Evelyn stepped cautiously toward a small fountain that stood at the center of the playground. The water had long dried up, leaving behind a dirty husk, cracked tiles glinting under the faint light that illuminated the area with an unsettling glow. "What happened here?" she mused, glancing around the desolate landscape. "Something unnatural," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. A chill crept up my spine as I took a few steps closer to the fountain, the remnants of laughter still echoing softly like distant memories. But it soon turned sinister. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows around the playground, flickering like candle flames caught in an unseen wind. I could see children's faces twisting grotesquely, mouths stretching into unnatural grins, their laughter ricocheting eerily off the empty vestiges of this place. One child, a girl with braids, stopped abruptly and turned her head, her eyes hollow, staring directly at me, devoid of humanity. "They never leave," she said, her voice sweet yet chilling, echoing across the space. "We'll play forever." An icy dread enveloped me. I felt the darkness coiling tightly around us once more, ready to ensnare us in its grip. "No!" I shouted vehemently, forcing myself to remember who I was. "You're not real." But the laughter grew louder, filling the air around us, rising to a fever pitch. As I looked away, the playground distorted, the swings twisting impossibly, their movements haunting and chaotic. "We can't stay here," I urged, pulling Evelyn back toward the doorway through which we had just arrived, but the darkness was creeping closer, tightening its grasp, filling the air with suffocating despair. Suddenly, figures began to emerge from the shadows, climbing out of the void like ink spilling across the floor. Except these shadows took on vaguely human forms, their features obscured, yet filled with an unmistakable intent. "Join us," they cried in unison, voices echoing like a chorus of the damned. I felt an irrational pull towards them, the very essence of what I feared most beckoning me closer. "Fight it!" Evelyn screamed, her voice slicing through the chaos, drawing in every ounce of my strength. I focused on the light that still flickered within me, refusing to let it extinguish. We could not give in. Hand in hand, we thrust the light forward, illuminating the darkness, forcing the shadows to retreat. With a surge, we pushed back against the tide, watching as the figures wailed and faded, battered by the very essence of hope that fueled our resistance. But I could feel their resentment rising, hungry for our fears. We had to move before they regrouped. Over there, I pointed toward an archway glowing faintly in the darkness. Our only escape. Without hesitation, we dashed toward it, the shadows clawing at our backs as we ran. I could hear their whispers, their taunts choking the space around us. You will never escape the darkness within. But fueled by our desperate need to survive, we dove through the archway, leaving behind the haunting laughter echoing in our ears. We emerged into another corridor, shadowy and disorienting, the walls pulsating like a heartbeat. My skin prickled with foreboding as I advanced cautiously, knowing too well that the darkness was still in pursuit, lurking just beyond my vision. Keep moving, Evelyn urged, her voice low yet firm amidst the silence. We pushed forward, but each corner we turned only revealed more shadows creeping in from the edges, sprawling and reaching like clawing hands desperate to pull us back into their depths. Glancing over my shoulder, the void loomed larger, whispers piercing through the stillness with penetrating clarity. You can't hide from what you fear, no matter how fast you run, a voice hissed, wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. The shadows coalesced at the edge of my vision, dark tendrils stretching, and I felt a surge of doubt creeping in. We have to believe we can win, I shouted, feeling the warmth flicker within. The battle, not just against the dark outside, but within myself. Suddenly, the corridor split in two, darkness spilling from both directions like a flood. I hesitated, knowing that either way could lead us deeper into despair. Which way? I gasped, uncertainty gnawing at my resolve. Evelyn looked at me, her face pale but steadfast. I don't know, but we can't waste any more time. Heart racing, I felt the shadows closing in. Spurred by desperation, I chose the left path, knowing the right could just as easily lead to doom. Ahead, flickering lights danced on the wall, leading us into a room that felt foreboding yet oddly familiar. Once again, I found myself in a space identical to the mirror room from before, echoes of time repeating in unsettling patterns. This can't be real, I murmured, dread wrapping around my heart like a serpent. The walls shimmered, distorting reflections that morphed and twisted into grotesque parodies of ourselves. Shadowy figures floated through the glass, staring out with hollow eyes, mouths stretched in silent screams. Every choice you make resonates here, twisting reality into something far darker than before. One moment I saw myself senselessly grinning back, and the next I was confronted by a version of myself, cloaked in despair, weeping silent tears that blurred the line between memory and nightmare. The air thickened around me, pressing down like a heavy storm cloud, stifling my breath and thoughts. I could feel the despair from the mirrors pulling me in, luring me to step closer, to let the shadows brush against my skin, promising safety and surrender, whispering secrets that echoed deep within my mind. You can't escape who you really are, they taunted, their words slithering into my head like poisonous vines. Panic surged through my veins as the images drew nearer, their faces morphing into twisted reflections of my regrets, my fears, and every mistake I had ever made. I am not you, I shouted, desperate to sever the connection, to assert my own existence against the tide of darkness closing in. Evelyn's presence grounded me, a flicker of light in the chaotic storm. We must break this, she urged, stepping beside me, our arms brushing against each other's in a gesture of unity. Remember the light we created. With that, I summoned the flickering warmth within me, envisioning it radiating outward. The darker reflections shrank back, their expressions turning to fury as the light pushed against them. You have no hold over me, I declared, my voice filled with conviction, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my courage, raising a chilling question. What if the darkness was right? Suddenly, a horrifying sound pierced the air, a cacophony of laughter, sinister and distorted, echoing from the shadows. It warped into a voice that slithered in around me. Accept your fate. Join us in eternal sorrow. The walls twisted, distorting the mirrors until they resembled warped flesh, stretching and pulsating as if alive with the pain and anguish I'd fought against in my mind. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, focusing on controlling the overwhelming tide of emotions. Each image from the mirrors faded in and out, a deluge of despair reminding me of all I wished to forget. Don't look away. Evelyn's voice cut through the chaos, fierce and unyielding. Focus on our light. With her unwavering gaze anchored on me, I felt the warmth swell again, brighter this time, driven by our combined strength. Together, we reached for the light, arms outstretched, channeling every ounce of hope and defiance. I could almost taste the bitterness of fear on my lips, but I fought against it, letting the radiant energy wash over us and push the encroaching shadows away. But the darkness stubbornly surged back, an overwhelming wave that engulfed the light, threatening to extinguish it completely. I staggered, grappling with the sensation of falling into the abyss, echoes of laughter mingling with cries from the mirrors. They were ghastly figures clawing at reality, clawing at me. I felt Evelyn's grasp tighten, grounding me amid the chaos. Together, she exclaimed, determination fueling her words. We held on to that resolve as I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the trembling energy of defiance. Let's break this cycle, I shouted, letting our combined light burst forth like fireworks in the night sky, illuminating every corner of the nightmarish room. The shadows shrieked in rage, retreating from the radiant display, and for a brief moment, the air felt lighter, almost sweet, as the dark tendrils writhed and writhed, too pained to withstand our brilliance. One figure broke through the surface of the mirrors, a grotesque mockery of a friend from the past. It grinned wide, eyes glimmering with malice, as it stretched and twisted, trying to reach for what we had created. You can't escape me, it yelled, voice dripping with venom. You will always be bound to your own darkness. The guardian of my nightmares almost reached me, claws extending from a shadowy arm. Just before it could latch on, I steeled myself, rooting my mind deep within the light we forged, and focused on who I was. I am not afraid, I bellowed. I am free. A tremor swept through the room as the figure howled, its form shattering into countless shards that reflected the truth. In those fragments, I glimpsed visions of my life, joys and sorrows mingling, showing my choices flashing before my eyes. Each moment transformed into brilliant arcs of light, banishing the despair that had fueled my fears for too long. The other shadows joined in, twisting and writhing, desperate to reclaim me. But our light grew stronger, fueled by hope and resilience, pushing back against the tide of despair that sought to reclaim me. Evelyn and I pushed forward, the reflections growing clearer, showing the beauty of the paths I had chosen, the healing that had come from embracing my past. There was a rawness in these memories, a reminder of the strength found in vulnerability. Forward, I yelled, feeling the shift in the air, the pulse of the room changing as we pressed deeper into the reflection. This wasn't just a battle. It was a journey, a reclamation of all the pieces of myself that had been feared lost. But as we stepped closer to the heart of the space, a dark shadow cast over us, swallowing everything in gloom once more. It twisted and coiled like smoke, and from its depths emerged a monstrous figure, its features ambiguous but somehow familiar. You really think you can win? It croaked, a chilling sneer tracing its lips. Each word dripped with disdain, making my heart race with a dread that wrapped around my throat like a noose. I felt its presence surge, creeping into my mind, wrapping its tendrils around my thoughts. You are nothing alone. You need the shadows. Get out! I shouted, but panic clawed at me, mingling with fear, as the figure drew nearer, a vortex of malevolence swirling all around it. Embrace your nature, it laughed, a terrible sound that rattled my bones. I struggled against the onslaught, desperately trying to ward off the encroaching influence gnawing at my resolve. I felt the shadows tugging at my sanity, teasing me with sweet promises of acceptance, whispering that I would finally find peace if I just let go. But Evelyn stepped closer, a protective spark in her demeanor. "You are stronger than this," she roared, asserting her defiance against the encroaching figure. Fueled by her determination, I recalled the light we had built together, unruly and beautiful, a fusion of our spirits refusing to bow to despair. "You do not define me," I asserted, drawing from that inner well of brightness, pushing against the darkness with renewed passion. "Let's show them," Evelyn shouted, her light igniting beside mine, amplifying the warmth until it blazed like a sunstorm, casting the shadows into retreat once more. As the monstrous figure writhed, the shadows released their hold, leaving behind a bitter chill that lingered in the air. With that, I stepped forward, taking control of my destiny with every ounce of courage I could muster. We aimed for the center, the heart of the room pulsing with an ancient energy that shimmered under our growing intensity. The air felt electric, weaving a powerful web of light around us, illuminating the contours of our struggle as I neared the epicenter, the heart of darkness yet untouched. This could be the moment where everything changed. I could feel it in my bones. But as we neared, the darkness surged one last time, coiling around, trying to snuff out our light. It clung with icy fingers to my very essence, reaching into the depths with an urgency that spoke of eternal torment. "Don't let them win," Evelyn cried out, pulling me closer to her side, forcing me to focus. With renewed clarity, I called upon the warmth which radiated fiercely, illuminating our surroundings with purity. The monstrous figures melted away before the radiance, their shapes dissolving like ice under the blazing sun. But just as I felt in control, vibrations filled the air, the room crackling with energy spiraling out from the center. My chest tightened, overwhelmed by raw sensations, fiercely flickering like flames in the wind. "This is it," I gasped, determination now sharper than the shadows that surrounded us. As we reached the heart, a blinding flash erupted, the shadows screaming in agony, their voices drowning in the light. I felt more alive than ever before, a vibrant pulse flowing through my veins, a surge of power against the darkness, encapsulating everything I once feared. But as the brilliance peaked, a shadow broke free once more, a flicker cutting through the light like a knife. "Foolish," it hissed, its voice an echo of my deepest dread. "You cannot escape your destiny." With its last word, it lunged forward, and in that dreadful moment, I felt my heart race. But unlike before, I was ready. "Watch me," I screamed, unleashing every ounce of light I could muster, flooding the room with warmth so fierce it burned, enveloping the darkness that surrounded us in a fiery embrace. And as the shadows writhed and contorted, I watched as the room began to transform, walls crumbling under the sheer force of our determination, a testament to the power of light reclaiming the despair that had once threatened to consume us. In that moment, I felt empowered, knowing that the darkness would fight to survive, but we wouldn't let it win. We would break this cycle, one metamorphosis at a time. And as we stood amidst the chaos, the clarity of choice became crystallized, etching itself across the shadows lingering just beyond light's reach. Each flicker of the light ignited my spirit, propelling us forward, banishing the lingering remnants of despair, reclaiming what was ours. Our story was far from over. Standing united with Evelyn, I knew that we would face whatever lay ahead, walking the razor-thin line between shadows and light, prepared to battle the remnants of fear with every step we took. The room around us began to shift, the ground trembling beneath my feet, as if the very foundation was questioning our presence. Walls warped like the warped reflections I had seen before, and the air thickened with a pungent scent that I recognized too well. The stench of fear, regret, and sorrow curling like smoke. My heart raced as the shadows began to reassemble. I could see the outlines of figures creeping toward us, rising from the cracks and crevices as if the darkness itself had come alive. "Stay close," I whispered to Evelyn, my voice barely rising above the whispers of the encroaching shadows. Their whispers grew louder, morphing into a piercing cacophony echoing through my mind, a mix of pleading and mocking. "You will never escape." Each syllable clawed at my thoughts, unraveling my resolve, a malicious reminder of all I had been running from. Suddenly, one of the shadows split from the mass, stepping out into the dim light with an inhuman grace. Its eyes glowed with a sickly yellow hue, bearing down on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. A mouth stretched wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth like shards of glass. "You think you can just walk away?" It hissed, the very air around it growing heavy with malice. "No!" I shouted, forcing myself to stand tall as the figure continued to advance. A sudden wave of fear pulsed in my chest, but I pushed it down, remembering the power we forged together. I held my ground, channeling that warmth, willing it to expand, to push back against the sinister reality unraveling around me. Evelyn stood firm beside me, her face set with determination, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her brow. "We can't let them get to us," she said, her voice steady, but I could hear the unsteady breath that betrayed her calm exterior. The shadows circled us like vultures, their voices a mix of taunts and caresses that danced in the air, trying to worm their way into our minds. "We bear witness," they whispered in unison, their forms shifting and twisting, warping into faces from my past. Friends I lost, choices I regretted, moments where I felt isolated and afraid. Each visage floated in front of me, blurring the lines of reality and taunting me with the specters of my life. "You belong here. You can never be free." My heart hammered in my chest, caught between the urge to flee and the desire to fight. "No!" I yelled, shaking my head violently, as if that could clear the memories that threatened to overwhelm me. "I choose to fight." With a sudden surge of fury, I broke free from the weight of their gazes and, together with Evelyn, summoned our light once more. A blinding flare of energy erupted from our hands, illuminating the space in brilliant waves. The shadows recoiled, their grotesque features scowling as they were pushed back, flickering like candle flames in the wind. But just when I thought we could hold them at bay, the ground began to quake again, a low rumble rising from below, shaking the very air we breathed. I stumbled, barely keeping my footing against the increasing violence of the floor, and the shadows swirled, churning with rage. "You will pay for this insolence," they screeched, shrill voices echoing like 1,000 desperate calls for help, each cry gripping my heart with icy fingers. Suddenly, the ceiling above began to crack and splinter, dark fissures forming a web against the light. From those cracks, shadows began to pour down like liquid smoke, thick and suffocating. Panic stabbed at my chest as I struggled to draw in breath, the air growing heavy with dread. "We can't breathe," I gasped, feeling the weight of darkness encroaching, making each breath feel like a struggle against the oncoming abyss. Evelyn grabbed my arm, her grip strong and steady. "We need to hold together," she gasped, her eyes wide and fierce. And in that moment, her determination overshadowed my growing fear. "Focus on light. Use our fear against them." So I did. I pushed all the panic, all the dread into a singular thought, channeling it into that blinding light we created. The energy surged, wrapping around us like a second skin, flickering defiantly even as the darkness pressed down harder, trying to extinguish it. "We won't let you in," I yelled, imposing the very emotion I'd wished to escape, turning the darkness into fuel rather than weakness. As the shadows closed in, they began to recede slightly, temporarily halted by the purity of our combined force. "Just a little further," Evelyn urged, her voice rising above the clamor, guiding me through the swirling chaos. But as we pressed forward, the shadows morphed into something vastly more terrifying. They began to take on shapes that were no longer just figments of my past, but grotesque manifestations of my deepest fears, like mocking, wailing versions of myself, haunting me with every regret I once shunned. "Look at you," one sneered, its voice dripping with disdain. "Always running, never willing to face who you are." I felt my courage falter as its eyes bore down on me, each word weaving itself into my skin like needles, invading the very fabric of my resolve. "No!" I shouted, my voice unwavering despite the fear gripping my throat. I could feel the warmth flicker against the chill surrounding me, sparking with intensity. "I will not be defined by my fears." Just then, the ground cracked wide open, a chasm splitting through the middle of the room, exposing a swirling void of darkness beneath. With breathtaking speed, the shadows channeled into that abyss, screaming in fury as they were drawn into the depths below. I stumbled back, fear coursing through me, realizing we were teetering on the edge of an unfathomable pit. "Evelyn!" I cried, grasping her arm tightly as the maelstrom roared, the air thick with despair threatening to steal her away. "We have to hold on." As the swirling shadows frothed and writhed, trying to pull us down into the dark unknown, I closed my eyes, gathering all my strength to keep us grounded. I focused on the light, channeling everything I had, every spark, every flame, into our refuge. We are not going to be their next sacrifice. But the shadows surrounding us kept clawing at our minds, whispering promises of tranquility if we'd only let go of the fight. "Join us," they cooed softly, their voices alluring and tempting. "You are never alone in the shadows. We'll protect you." With every passing second, the sweet, seductive call was almost too inviting, pulling me closer to surrender. I turned to Evelyn, my vision fighting to remain clear against the haze of fear. "We can't let them win," I shouted, fortifying my voice with every bit of conviction left. "We're not alone. We have each other." With that, we pressed our hands together, intertwining our fingers tightly as our light surged brighter than before, a radiant beacon amid the swirling chaos. The shadows shrieked with fury, their screams escalating into a deafening roar as the fierce pulse of our light pushed them back, defending against the consuming darkness. I fought with all I had, feeling the fear crack and shatter against the might of our spirit. But just when I thought we had the advantage, one particularly dark figure surged forward, cutting through our light like a blade. It lunged at Evelyn, reaching for her, its jagged fingers stretching like claws poised to grasp. "No!" I screamed, instinct taking over as I pushed her behind me, standing firm in front of the relentless force. The shadows thrashed wildly, the pressure mounting until I was certain everything would collapse. I could feel the heart of the abyss beating beneath us, threatening to pull us into its whirlpool of despair. But I refused to let it win. I drew all my remaining strength, fueling it with resolve, with the memories of every choice I had wrestled with, every ounce of pain faced. "You have no power here," I declared, amplifying my voice like a sonic weapon, pouring residual energy into the pulse of light. With a titanic surge, the light erupted around us, pushing back the darkness, driving away the figures as they writhed in excruciating pain. Their screams filled the air, a chorus of anguish that sent chills racing down my spine. Yet even as the shadows recoiled, I knew this wasn't over. Darkness was relentless, an inescapable part of reality that would never fully fade, eternally lurking. The chasm beneath us expanded, yawning wide, ready to swallow anything trapped within its dark tendrils. I clutched Evelyn's hand tighter, willing the light to stand as a barrier, a reminder that in this fight, we were not alone. And as the echoes receded and the darkness fought to reclaim its territory, I felt something shift. The scales tipped toward hope and uncertainty. Our battle was only just beginning. Suddenly, a deafening silence washed over the room, suffocating the remnants of the shadows that had once clawed at our minds. It was an unnatural stillness, like the moment before a storm settles in, pregnant with tension, waiting to burst. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the lingering scent of dampness and decay that made my throat tighten in revulsion. I felt goosebumps rising on my skin, my instincts screaming that something was lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. Recognizing the danger, I focused on the light between us, willing it to strengthen, but a creeping dread gnawed at me. I glanced around the room, trying to decipher the shadows creeping closer at the edges, their forms limping like twisted puppets caught in some malevolent play. My breath quickened as I realized that the darkness was not gone, but merely biding its time, waiting for a chance to strike. Evelyn squeezed my hand tighter. "What is happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the fear welling up inside her. I could see her eyes darting nervously, searching for movement in the all-consuming murk. "Are they regrouping?" A chill swept through me as I nodded, unable to dismiss the notion that this was only the calm before an even greater menace. Before I could voice my thoughts, I heard it, a faint rustling, a whisper so soft it was almost imperceptible, yet it felt like 1,000 fingers skimming across my skin. The shadows at the edges of the room started to thicken, coalescing into figures that seemed to flicker in and out of reality like broken reflections in a shattered mirror. Suddenly, one of the figures lunged forward, its shape now more defined, eyes glinting like shards of ice. This was no mere shadow. This was something that felt more real, more tangible, and it bore a face I recognized all too well. My own, twisted and warped in a malevolent grin. "Don't you see?" it hissed, the voice dripping with a sinister glee. "You cannot escape what you are." My heart raced, terror worming its way into my chest as I took a step back, feeling the cold sweat trickle down my spine. "You're not me," I shouted, trying to dispel the creeping sense of dread. "You're just a lie." But the grotesque embodiment of my reflection only laughed, a high-pitched cackle that echoed unnervingly against the walls, creating a jarring symphony of chaos. "I am the truth you can't accept," it crooned, its voice a seductive blend of mockery and despair. "You are bound to me, just like you are bound to your past." The shadows behind it surged at the words, creeping closer as if empowered by the resonance of truth that rippled through my mind. I felt every moment of failure, every doubt, every fear rise up like a tidal wave, threatening to pull me under. "Evelyn," I cried, my gaze darting to her, hoping to find her strength. I felt shivers of panic surge through me as I noticed her own shadow flickering ominously at her feet, trying to take on a life of its own. "Stay strong. Don't let them get to you," I shouted, but deep down, uncertainty gnawed at me as I struggled to keep the light burning strong. "Why fight it?" my dark doppelganger taunted, taking a step closer, eyes boring into me with a predatory intensity. "Embrace this, and you can finally be free from the weight you carry. All of it, the pain, the suffering, can melt away." The shadows behind it converged, pulsing like a heartbeat, drawing my eyes toward them. They danced around the periphery of my vision, whispering sweet nothings that threaded through my mind, each one more tantalizing than the last. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to breathe despite the growing suffocation that surrounded me. "No, I have always fought to overcome," I snarled, feeling a spark of defiance ignite within me. "You're nothing but a shadow of my fears." With a deep breath, I reached deep inside, unleashing the light we had built together, allowing it to surge forth like a wave, blasting into the space around us. The shadows recoiled, hissing in agony as the brilliance exploded across the dread-filled room, temporarily illuminating the grotesque forms that lurked in the shadows. They shrieked as the light pierced through the murk, the laughter turning into cries of terror. "Foolish child," my reflection spat, teeth bared in a feral snarl. "You can't banish what is part of you. You will tire, and when you do, I will be waiting to drag you down into the abyss." Even as the light burned brightly, I knew they were right. Light would flicker, darkness would linger, an unending cycle of conflict. I couldn't let the fear consume me. "We'll always rise again," I shouted back, refusing to back down. We're not going anywhere. With that, I focused on the warmth radiating from our connection, and an idea sparked in my mind. This wasn't just about fighting off an enemy. It was about embracing every part of myself, even the darkest corners that I had tried so hard to hide. Evelyn, we need to channel our fears, confront them, I yelled, locking eyes with her. We can't fight against what we are. We must integrate it. Only then will the shadows lose their power. She nodded, the fear pooling in her eyes counterbalanced by a glimmer of understanding. Together we took deep breaths, choosing to still the chaos swirling around us, and instead found the pulse of our combined energy. I absorbed the dread and unease creeping at the edges, transforming it into warmth, letting the light wrap around us. As we stood firm, a shifting began within the dark figure, and it faded momentarily, the edges blurring and softening. For a heartbeat, the grotesque features morphed into something more human, and I felt a pang of sympathy. "Do you really think you can accept me?" it murmured, a flicker of uncertainty threading through its voice. "Yes," I breathed, suddenly realizing that this was the essence of my fight. I had spent so long hiding from every painful piece of myself, every regret and heartache. It was time to face them boldly rather than run away. "You are a part of me, but you do not define me." As I spoke those words, my light surged brighter, shimmering with newfound intensity, piercing through the dark illusion surrounding us. The monstrous figure shrieked as the illumination enveloped it, illuminating the fears as they twisted and contorted in excruciating agony. But right as it seemed victory might be graspable, the shadows converged, sensing a weakness, and lunged as one. I felt the air thicken as they pulled us back, trying to swallow us whole again. An army of whispers flooded my mind, yelling all my insecurities, every doubt, and tormenting me with what I had tried to forget. "You will fail. You will fall," they taunted, dragging us back toward the chasm. "No!" I shrieked, scrambling to stay upright. I imagined every moment of strength I had shown, every battle I had faced and survived triumphantly. Likewise, I pictured each setback, every moment of helplessness. And for the first time, I didn't push those feelings away. Instead, I embraced their existence. "Come, let's merge our light," I yelled to Evelyn, feeling the surge of our power reach its peak. Evelyn's energy pulsed next to me, and together we flooded the air with warmth. And all at once, I felt every piece of my identity, the joys and the sorrows spinning together into a joyful explosion that erupted outward. The shadows wavered. The darkness began to peel away, and I could almost taste the victory, the sweet relief hovering temptingly before us. But no sooner had we gained ground than everything shifted again. The room twisted and turned, becoming a dizzying whirlwind. It felt as if I were falling sideways, collapsing in on myself. My stomach dropped as the shadows closed in, and I realized we were being sucked into the swirling void below. "Hold on, Evelyn," I shouted, gripping her hand tighter, ready to fight against whatever came next. But my vision blurred, and in that haze, the shadows beckoned, whispering secrets that wrapped around my thoughts, urging me to let go. "You can rest now. You've fought long enough." And the darkness, oh so inviting, pulsed at the edge of my mind, coiling like smoke, ready to welcome me into its embrace. I shook my head, forcing back the sensual pull of surrender, and focused on the light just ahead. "We will rise above. We will conquer," I declared, my own voice a defiant echo against the chaos closing in. But even as I cried out, the shadows surged, overwhelming, like a tidal wave crashing against a frail boat. I felt the grip upon us loosening, the light flickering as my resolve faltered, and I braced myself for the inevitable plunge into the consuming dark. Just as I felt the edge slip beneath me, I summoned every ounce of courage I had left, clawing back against the tide. "Together!" I shouted with all my might. In that powerful instant, the sound resonated through the room. The very walls swallowed my cries, reformulating the air into a scream of defiance. And though I couldn't see the outcome, deep in my heart, I knew we would fight. Fight until the very end. The shadows may encroach, darkness may linger, but I was prepared to battle as long as I had the strength to stand. No matter what emerged from those depths, I would not succumb to despair. With a final, powerful blaze of light radiating from my core, I plunged straight into the heart of the darkness awaiting us, ready to confront whatever horror was lurking in the shadows below. I believed then, in that moment, that every piece of fear, pain, and regret would soon fall under the light. I was ready to uncover the truth waiting beneath the abyss. As I descended, a strange sensation enveloped me, a kind of weightlessness that made me feel disconnected from reality. The world around me blurred, the edges of light beginning to whittle away until I could barely keep a grip on the last remnants of brightness. I fought the feeling, holding tight to the connection I had with Evelyn. The moment felt surreal, as if time itself had stretched into an unbearable silence. Then, without warning, the ground beneath us vanished. I gasped, my body tumbling into a vast expanse of darkness where light barely dared to enter. Out of the inky blackness emerged echoes of laughter, chilling, hollow sounds reverberating through the void. They danced around me, taunting, like disembodied spirits reveling in my descent into chaos. Each laugh was a sharp sting, winding its way into my mind, pulling at my sense of reality. Shapes began to materialize from the abyss. Ghostly figures floated around me, their faces twisted in agonized expressions. They seemed to glide effortlessly, their ethereal forms shifting like shadows cast under flickering lights. "Welcome to the depths," one whispered, a voice like broken glass, slithering through the air. "You belong with us, lost and forgotten." Their eyes glinted with a strange light, beckoning me in. I could feel their sorrow, their despair wrapping around me like a heavy fog. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice breaking as it echoed against the non-existent walls, my heart pounding in my chest like a caged animal fighting to escape. "Everything you've denied," they cooed in unison, their voices dripping with an eerie harmony that sent shivers through me. "Your pain, your fear. We are all that remains of what you refuse to confront." I shook my head, trying to block out their whispers, but their words burrowed deep into my mind. Visions began to swirl around me, each more haunting than the last. I saw myself as a child, lost in a darkened room, alone and afraid, grasping at shadows that whispered secrets I was determined to forget. I felt the sting of betrayal from friends who left me alone in my darkest moments. I witnessed the moments when I turned away from the chance to speak my truth, choosing silence over the risk of conflict. Suddenly, the laughter turned into mocking cackles, and the shadows lunged closer, closing in on me. "You were always meant to drown in despair," the figures hissed, the air around me growing colder as. The weight of their gaze bore down. Their fingers reached out, wisp-like, trying to touch me, to pull me into their abyss. Fingers! I could feel them brushing against my skin, icy cold, as if they were trying to siphon away my warmth, my strength. Panic bubbled up within me as I fought against their grasp. "No!" I screamed, summoning every bit of energy I had left and pulling Evelyn to me, holding on with all my might, determined not to let these shadows win. "We're not giving in. We're stronger than this." But the air shuddered, and the laughter intensified, echoing all around us like a cruel symphony. The shadows pulsed, warping in rhythm to a dark heartbeat as they drew nearer, endless whispers rising in crescendo, drowning me in a storm of voices, each clawing at my sanity. "You can't escape. You'll never escape," they screeched, and in that moment of chaos, I felt my grip on reality slipping. The light around me flickered violently, growing dim and feeble as the shadows began to consume it, inch by inch. Just when it felt like all was lost, I caught sight of something shimmering in the distance, a speck of light, faint but unwavering. "Evelyn!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the cacophony like a knife. "Focus on the light. We have to reach it." With a surge of determination, I pushed my way through the shadows, clutching onto the warmth of Evelyn's hand. As we fought against the tide of darkness, I realized I wasn't just battling the shadows. I was battling my own rejection of everything they represented. For the first time, I understood that denying my fears only made them stronger. I needed to face each one if I were to break free from this prison of despair. The closer we got to the light, the more frantic the shadows became. Their forms twisted wildly, and their voices shrieked louder, trying to bury me in darkness. "You will regret this," one snapped, its face morphing into a grotesque version of my worst memories, a twisted mirror reflecting every failure I ever felt. "Enough!" I yelled, drawing on every bit of strength and love I had for Evelyn, my spirits flickering like a candle in the gale. I summoned the glow within me, the warmth that promised hope and safety. "You can't control me. You have no power here." With those words, I felt a tremor of energy pulse through me, amplifying the light we had forged together. It exploded outward, illuminating the shadows around us, pushing back against the creeping dread. The shrieks of despair turned to anguished howls, panicking as they scattered like leaves caught in a tempest. But as the light surged, the air vibrated ominously, and I knew it would not last. "Evelyn, keep your eyes on the light," I urged, feeling the shadows closing in again, fighting against our glow with desperate ferocity. "Don't let them in." Something suddenly shifted within the dark whirlwind, a flicker of malevolence that startled me to my core. The shadows began to coalesce once more, weaving into an even thicker cloud, and from within it emerged a figure far larger than the rest. Its visage was terrifying, a jumbled collection of faces crying and pleading, shadows of my past regrets and fears blending into one grotesque entity. "I am all that you've buried, all that you've attempted to forget," it boomed, its voice echoing like thunder. "You think you can banish me? You cannot erase what is a part of you." The air grew stale, oppressive, tightening around me like a noose. My heart raced, pounding louder than the voices raging around me. "Get back!" I shouted, the cold chill of terror seeping into my veins. Desperation fueled my fight as I felt my resolve beginning to waver. "You have no hold over me," I screamed, pushing with all my might against the darkness, threatening to consume everything I had fought for. But it hungered for my fear like a wolf awaiting a feast, savoring every ounce of doubt and despair within me. The shadows shrouded me, encasing my vision with doubts that clawed at my mind. "Do you really believe you can win this?" they crooned, their voices a haunting whisper that crawled beneath my skin. "You are still that scared child, longing to hide." Images of my past flooded back as the embodiment of my fears advanced, its sinister presence dominating the space around us. Years of suppression, buried memories surged forth, each pain, every moment of weakness swirling into a tempest of raw emotion that contradicted my very existence. It was an avalanche of despair that threatened to crush me beneath its weight. But amidst that chaos, I felt a flicker inside me, a whisper of hope that refused to die. I remembered the moments of strength, the triumphs I had achieved, the power and the light I shared with Evelyn. There was still a fight left in me, and I would not let the darkness win this battle. "Together!" I shouted, locking eyes with Evelyn, her fierce spirit igniting the last embers of my resolve. With our hands gripped tightly, I summoned all the light we had built together, pouring it into a single beam that shot out in defiance. The wave of brightness cascaded outward, slicing into the oppressive darkness. The shadows writhed and howled in protest, clawing at the light, desperately trying to stifle it. But I felt the warmth grow, the light expanding like the dawn breaking through a long, dark night. "Don't hold back," I called out to Evelyn, and we summoned every ounce of energy, transforming our shared pain into a brilliant beacon that pierced the very heart of the mass. The cacophony of cries turned to gasps of fear as the dark visage began to dissolve under the assault of our combined strength. Just when it seemed that our resolve would force the darkness to yield, The monstrous shadow surged forward, engulfing us in a tidal wave of despair, cold and suffocating. I felt the anguish wrap around me, and every memory of regret clawed at my soul, threatening to drag me down. But I remembered something fundamental. This was my fight, my battle against the shadows that wanted nothing more than to consume me whole. The light pulsing inside me flared brighter, igniting with a fierceness I didn't know I had left. "No!" I screamed again, a raw cry that burst forth from my lungs, echoing through the void. "You do not get to decide my fate." Light engulfed me in response, dazzling and blinding, spiraling into a luminous tempest that pushed back against the shadows, forcing the darkness to retreat. I felt the air begin to freshen, the whispers turning to faint cries as the shadows evaporated into nothing. I poured everything I had into that shining glow, believing that this was the moment of truth. Just then, a collective scream erupted from the shadows as they were thrown back, the darkness quaking in fear. I felt the grip on my heart loosen, the pulling sensation easing, replaced by a profound relief. The choking blackness was beginning to fade, and for the first time, I felt the warmth of liberation wrap around me. But in that moment of triumph, just as victory seemed closer than ever, I heard a low rumble deep within the void, a new sound, deep and resonant, threatening to shatter the fragile peace we began to find. The shadows coiled and twisted, regrouping like angry serpents preparing to strike. "Foolish child," the voice thundered, twice as strong as before. "You think you can banish me? You are merely igniting my fury." The walls of the abyss trembled, and the darkness surged back, swirling around us with renewed power. Despite the burst of light, I knew the fight wasn't over. I felt the pull of the shadows growing stronger around me, their presence an inescapable reminder that my battle against fear and pain would never simply end. But as I stood there, holding fiercely onto Evelyn, I knew one thing. No matter how deep or dark this abyss went, I would face it with the same unyielding spirit. The light wouldn't die. I wouldn't let it die. Together, I whispered once more to Evelyn, my voice steady now. "We will rise," and with each word, a flicker ignited, blossoming into a flame that promised we would continue to fight, no matter what horrors lay ahead. My eyes locked onto the swirling depths, and I felt the darkness pulse around me, throbbing like a living entity, eager to consume every shred of hope I had left. I drew in a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever awaited in the shadows. The air around us thickened, becoming heavier, each inhale tasting like ash. Above the cacophony of whispers, I could hear the low growl of the entity that emerged from the depths, echoing through the void. It roared with a voice that trembled the very essence of my being. "Do you think your light can save you?" It mocked, the shadows swirling like a tempest, forming grotesque shapes that danced in and out of my line of sight. Faces flickered within the darkness, distorted visages of people I knew, twisted in agony, their mouths open in silent screams as they clawed at the void, reaching for me, begging for help. "No, you are not real," I shouted at them, heart racing, knowing that they were illusions, but still, their despair clawed at my heart, threatening to pull me under. "Are you sure?" The voice sneered. The shadows morphed, and suddenly, a familiar figure stepped forward, its features bathed in darkness, eyes hollow and cold. It was my reflection, but not the one I had fought so hard to conquer. This was the version of me I feared the most, the one that relished in my insecurities. "Look at you," it whispered, its voice dripping with venom. "You're weak. You're nothing without me." The shadows wrapped around the reflection, coursing through its form like a black mist, bringing it to life in a vivid embodiment of despair. "No!" I cried, feeling the panic swell. "You don't control me." But even as I said it, doubt crept in, a persistent reminder of every time I'd felt inadequate, every failure I recalled like scars etched into my memory. The darkness thrummed with pleasure, knowing it was pushing against my defenses. With renewed determination, I seized a fragment of light that still flickered in my heart, letting it surge to life. I could feel it coursing through every fiber of my being, warm and vibrant. I wouldn't let this entity reduce me to my fears. My grip tightened around Evelyn's hand, and together, we shared that light, our bond a beacon against the encroaching dark. But then the shadows hardened, and the grotesque figure lunged, sending tendrils of darkness snaking toward us. I felt them wrap around my throat, squeezing tightly, cutting off my breath as I struggled against their grip. The air grew heavy and stale, suffocating me, every gasp a reminder of the nightmares I had tried to bury. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, cackling with satisfaction. "Join us," they hissed, a chorus of tortured souls begging for my surrender. "You will never escape this place. You will always belong to the darkness." I couldn't let their words take me. Summoning all my will, I focused on the warmth surging within me, the light that felt like home. "We are not alone," I shouted, the words ripping free with a raw intensity that resonated through the void. "We have each other." The shadows hesitated, twisting uncertainly, and I felt the grip around my throat loosen just enough for me to draw breath. I pushed forward, each pulse of light countering the waves of darkness. As if reacting to my defiance, the entity shrieked in anger. A whirlwind of shadows spiraled around me, threatening to tear through my resolve as I saw more figures suspended in their morbid dance. Lost souls trapped forever, mouths twisted in screams of despair. Each face was a reminder of every moment I feared. My fears made flesh, grotesque and menacing. I staggered back, closing my eyes against the horror, but the images burned in my mind, their dread palpable. I could hear their whispers, a sinister lullaby, coaxing me closer. "Embrace us," they whined, voices dripping with darkness. "Relinquish your fight. It's easier to sink than to struggle." In that moment of weakness, doubt seeped into my heart, threatening to cloud my vision. I felt the light flicker, wavering as my thoughts spiraled into chaos. But Evelyn's grip tightened, a grounding force pulling me back from the edge. "No, we have to be stronger than this," she urged, her voice fierce despite the terror surrounding us. "Trust in the light." Fueled by her words, I opened my eyes, even as the voices clawed at the edges of my mind. Turning toward the shadowy tempest, I was resolved to break free. "You are not my truth," I yelled, feeling a surge of will as I channeled everything I had, my love, my fears, my hopes, all churning and melding into a powerful force in my gut. The energies collided within the darkness. My impassioned cry ignited a brilliant wave of light, pushing through the suffocating haze. This light reverberated with the memories of those missing, and suddenly, the figures in the dark seemed hesitant, flickering like candle flames caught in the wind. "Stop!" I commanded, aware of the shadows shifting uneasily. "You cannot keep them." I poured every ounce of my being into that radiant force, spreading the light like a sunbeam piercing the morning fog. Bright and blinding, it shot outward, illuminating the faces of those trapped within the darkness, their expressions shifting from agony to relief as the shadows recoiled. But just as victory felt near, the atmosphere shifted. The air thickened, crackling with dark energy as the oppressive shadow lunged forward, engulfed by rage. Its form twisted and expanded, trying to include everything in its wake. I could feel the very fabric of the void recoil, my heart racing as it coiled around me, attempting to swallow me whole with its chilling embrace. "Foolish child," it shrieked with newfound fury. "You think you can conquer your past? You think you can dim my powers with your meager light?" I closed my eyes and pressed deeper into the light, letting its radiant energy fill me completely. I was not just fighting darkness. I was reclaiming every piece of myself. Memories surged forward, each piercing through the oppressive weight of the shadows, bringing forth the truth of who I was, the joys, the pain, the life I had lived. Together, "Evelyn," I shouted, our bond a tether that chained us to hope. Just as the darkness lunged at my vulnerabilities, I hurled the weight of my being into the shimmering light, desperate to breach the shadows once and for all. It was an explosion of brilliance, a fierce, blinding force that cut through the clinging darkness like a knife through cloth. The shadows howled, twisting and writhing, as the light began to unravel their hold. "Feel your fears fade," I cried, pushing toward the heart of the shadowy mass. No longer a frightened child, but a warrior of my spirit. The light engulfed the entity, illuminating its twisted features. And for a heartbeat, I saw its true essence. An amalgamation of every regret I ever carried, every shattered dream clinging to the edges of despair. "Let go!" I screamed, unleashing the full weight of my light. The abyss trembled under the revelation, its hold on my mind losing power, twisting as it writhed in pain. But just as the shadows seemed to dissolve, a final strike came forth, a cold, creeping dread that snaked through the air like poison. I felt a chill wind whip past me, turning icy fingers across my skin. In the depths of turmoil, new faces emerged, ones I had fought to forget, those I had lost or abandoned, their eyes wide with sorrow. "Why did you leave us?" they cried, their voices mingling with the shadows, wrapping me in guilt. A chilling reminder of every pain I had inflicted, every moment of silence when I could have spoken out. As I stumbled, feeling the grip of the dark tide closing in, I sensed the light inside me flicker dangerously close to darkness. I was torn between the luminous hope that beckoned me forward and the weight of sorrow that threatened to drag me down. "No!" I gasped, the struggle seeming insurmountable, my resolve wavering under the weight of the memories. "I won't let your pain consume me." Yet the shadows responded, surging with more force, feeding on my conflict, growing stronger with every doubt that crept into my heart. "You will regret this," they screamed, their fury launching a final assault around me. I held on to Evelyn harder, feeling the hope radiate between us, clenching my teeth against the suffocation of despair as I dared to reclaim my voice. "Together," I whispered, the light pulsing once more, every ounce of pain becoming fuel for my resolve. "Together!" And as I screamed those words once more, the darkness shattered around us, forced to yield to the unbearable light that surged forth, revealing a pathway through the miasma, the path leading to whatever awaited beyond the abyss. What lay ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty, but this time, I wouldn't let fear dictate my steps. I'd forged my light, and now it was time to walk through the darkness, hand in hand with Evelyn, ready for whatever lay waiting in the unknown. And as I screamed those words once more, the darkness shattered around us, forced to yield to the unbearable light that surged forth, revealing a pathway through the miasma, the path leading to whatever awaited beyond the abyss. The moment I took a step forward, the shadows screamed in fury, the sound sharp and piercing. They writhed like a living thing, trying to claw their way back, but I could feel the essence of my light pushing them back. The flickering glow ahead beckoned us, a promise of safety amid the chaos. And with every step, I felt the ground beneath me pulse with energy. But then the dark tide shifted again, swirling in a way that sent chills down my spine. Tendrils of shadow snaked out, wrapping around my ankles like cold shackles, pulling with an unnerving strength, forcing me to stop. I looked down, panic surging through my veins as the darkness began to seep into the very fabric of my clothing, creeping toward my skin. Whispers rose again, a chorus of twisted voices that seemed to travel through the air like wind. "Stay with us. You are one of us. Your light will not save you." With a surge of determination, I fought against the encroaching shadows. "I am not yours," I yelled, shaking free from their grasp for a split second, enough to move just a little closer to the light that shimmered in the distance, inviting and warm. But every time I made progress, the shadows retaliated, pulling more forcefully, and I stumbled back even as I pushed forward. Evelyn remained by my side, her face pale but resolute. She seemed to sense my struggle, and as I looked into her eyes, I saw the flicker of the same spirit I felt within me. "We can't give in," she urged, her voice carrying the weight of shared desperation. "Remember what we're fighting for." But the shadows didn't let up. They flooded toward us, dark and consuming, taking on grotesque forms that mirrored our fears. I saw the face of a younger me, terrified and lost, cowering in a corner when life had felt too heavy. I saw memories of my childhood fears, monsters hiding in closets, lurking just out of sight. Each fragment of shadow that rushed past was a piece of my past rearing its ugly head. "Stop," I said through gritted teeth. "You're done haunting me." In that moment, the air vibrated with a deep resonance. The shadows halted for a second, their ferocity wavering just enough for me to notice. But it was a fleeting moment of vulnerability, for the ghastly forms surged forward, a wall of darkness that towered over us, threatening to crash down like a great tsunami. "I can't," I started, biting down on my fear. But Evelyn squeezed my hand, her strength a tether anchoring me to reality. "We have to feed the light," she said, her eyes locking on mine. "Together, remember? Together." And so I dug deeper, letting my emotion coalesce into something tangible. With a sharp inhale, I took every fleeting moment of hope and joy, every strength that had lasted through years of torment, and poured it into the light that flickered before us. As if responding to our shared resolve, the glow exploded in brilliant hues, illuminating the darkened expanse as it stretched forward, unfurling like a flower blooming under the sun. I could see the shadows shrink back in horror, unable to comprehend the force of our unity. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. From the pit of the darkness, a terrifying shape rose, far larger than anything we had faced before. It wasn't just a collection of fears anymore. It was a being of pure malice, its form shifting and twisting, eyes glowing a deep, ominous red. "Foolish humans," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard, digging and scraping against my mind. "You think you can escape me? I am the embodiment of every fear you carry, every regret that weighs you down." The chill in its voice pierced through my resolve, and cold terror settled in my stomach. "You are nothing," I shouted, though my voice trembled, drowning beneath the wave of dread crashing against us. As I took a step back, the dark beast seemed to dissolve into swirling shadows, only to reappear right in front of me, closing the distance with a speed I couldn't comprehend. It towered over us, a mass of shifting forms and eyes that bore into my soul, each one a dark mirror reflecting my deepest fears. "See how weak you are? How far you must fall to live up to the darkness." I wanted to scream, to tell it to go away, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadows around me pulsed and thrummed, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. It wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, igniting a feeling of hopelessness I thought I had long ago buried. "Help me!" I gasped, turning desperately to Evelyn. But even as I said it, I could see her starting to falter, her own resolve wavering in the face of the dark creature. But just then, a glimmer sparked within me, ignited by Evelyn's unwavering presence. The light surged, flickering as if it could sense my desperation. With renewed strength, I took her hand and held it tightly, drawing on the warmth that radiated from our bond. Together, I echoed again, and we became a singular source of light, merging our strengths into one powerful force. I felt the warmth spreading through me, burning away the creeping chill of despair, igniting my spirit. The shadows roared, a cacophony of anguish and anger as our united light rushed toward the monstrous figure. The air crackled with energy as we pushed forward, the shadows recoiling violently as they were cast aside, our resolve like an unstoppable tide crashing against the shore. "Feel the heat of your truth," I shouted, the intensity of the moment drowning out the noise of the darkness. The glowing, a path through the void, illuminating the faces of those I'd feared, dissolving their tortured visages until they were nothing but wisps of smoke. I concentrated, aiming the light straight at the beast, the embodiment of every fear I had ever known. For a moment, the creature seemed to falter, the shadows quaking in response as the light burned brighter. But then it bellowed with a ferocity that rattled my bones. "Your light will fail. You cannot escape me." It surged forward, tendrils of darkness spiraling toward me, thick with malice and intent on dragging me down into the depths. I squeezed my eyes shut as thoughts raced through my mind. The vivid images of my failures, my regrets, crowded my thoughts. "No, I reject you," I shouted, forcing back the tide even as the pressure built. I could feel the shadows wrapping tighter, but the light wasn't fading. It pulsed with every heartbeat, rekindled by my refusal to accept despair. Evelyn's presence ignited my spirit, and just when I thought the darkness would engulf us, I channeled everything I had into that light. I focused on the moments of triumph instead, the laughter shared with friends, the warmth of love, the fleeting joys that reminded me of my strength. The shadows shrieked, their form beginning to quiver as I unleashed the light, feeling it burst from my core like the sun breaking through the longest night. Our light clashed with the encroaching darkness in a cataclysmic explosion, the shockwave pushing the shadows back, streaming away like dust in the wind. But amidst that chaos, a chilling thought nagged at the back of my mind. What if the darkness was a part of me that could never fully be vanquished? As if sensing my doubt, the monstrous entity twisted and transformed, forming grotesque images of all the people I loved, their faces contorted in sorrow. "They will all suffer because of you," it hissed, filling me with dread. "You cannot run from this." Suddenly, I was flooded with horrifying thoughts of loss, visions of Evelyn slipping away, faces disappearing into the ether, the echo of silence where laughter once filled the space. "No, I won't let you win," I screamed, channeling every ounce of my anger into the light, hoping to mend the fractures in my heart. I pushed against the overwhelming darkness, the tide refusing to relent. The monster lunged again, shadowy claws reaching out to encircle us both. But in that moment of desperation, I felt my connection with Evelyn deepen. Together, we formed a shield against the creeping dark, heartbeats synchronized, pulses of light weaving into a protective barrier. "Remember this," I whispered, the shadows curling back in response. "We remembered our strength. We survived before, and we will survive again." Each word amplified the light, sending a burst of energy that flooded toward the darkness. The creature howled, a sound so chilling it threatened to freeze the very marrow of my bones. "You cannot escape the truth. You will always belong to the shadows." Yet as those words echoed, I felt something shift within me. I had lived in fear for too long, let guilt dictate my actions. My heart was racing now, propelling me forward with the strength of my convictions. "The past does not own me," I roared, pushing with the force of all I had. Every moment of pain transformed into radiant power, sending shockwaves through the dark. The shadowy tendrils recoiled, momentarily stunned by the surge of light and strength. I felt a ferocious exhilaration take hold, the sensation of breaking free. I was no longer merely a vessel of light. I had become the incandescent force of resilience, embodying every ounce of hope, love, and defiance against the darkness that sought to consume. With every ounce of strength, I pressed forward, shattering the darkness that had taunted me for so long, the tendrils of shadow retreating like mice from a flame. They screeched and writhed as the light surged, forcing the monstrous entity into retreat, its parts dissolving into clouds of mist, dissipating into the air. But as the darkness faded, a final thought gripped me. I felt the abyss shift. What if this was just a temporary victory? What if new shadows lurked just beyond the horizon, waiting for me to falter again? The shadows might fade, but they would return, lurking in the corners of my mind, ready to strike the instant I let my guard down. And that realization sent another chill down my spine. I had to keep moving, stay vigilant. We had carved a path through the dark. But what lay ahead? The glow beckoned, revealing a landscape of fractured light and shadow, a realm balancing between both. I looked at Evelyn, determination etched on her face. "We can do this together," I assured her, the warmth blossoming in my chest, my fear tamed by our shared connection. The light pulsed around us as we stepped into the mysterious landscape of shifting illusions, the shadows still swirling in our wake. But something else loomed in the distance, a dark tower rising against the horizon, its silhouette jagged and ominous, a pervading sense of dread crawling up my spine. It felt like a final trial, a last defense of whatever dark force awaited us. "What do you think is in there?" I whispered, my voice barely a murmur against the turmoil that surrounded us. "I don't know," Evelyn replied, her expression shadowed with uncertainty. "But we can't turn back now." With a deep breath, we closed the distance to the base of the towering structure, the atmosphere thickening as we approached. Each step felt like a heartbeat echoing within the void, the ground beneath vibrating with dark energy. As we entered, the entrance yawned wide, revealing an insidious maze of darkness within. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, rhythmically thrumming in sync with the depths of our fears. I could feel the air grow cooler, each breath becoming a labored task, as if the darkness itself sought to smother us. The walls were covered in shifting images, snippets of my life, moments I had tried to forget, each one more painful than the last. Faces of loved ones that slipped away, memories of failure and regret, all superimposed against the shadowy backdrop, looming impossibly tall. It felt as if the tower itself was feeding off my anguish, drawing me deeper into despair. "Stay close," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the oppressive weight around us. "We will face this together. Whatever it is, we can overcome it." As we moved deeper into the tower, the images grew more vivid, each scene striking me like a dagger. I saw my younger self standing alone in the rain, soaked and shivering, surrounded by shadows whispering, "You are not enough." I forced myself to look away, only for the next vision to strike deeper. My parents, their faces shadowed with disappointment, shaking their heads as I struggled to meet their expectations. The guilt crashed over me like a wave, dragging me down into the depths of my memories, pulling me away from the present. I gasped as the air grew heavier, mirroring the weight of every breath I took. "No, I won't let it pull me down," I screamed, shaking my head violently to dispel the memories that threatened to drown me. Each whispered fear was like a thorn digging into my skin, trying to convince me that it was all true, that I was destined to fail, to drown in regret. Evelyn stood firm beside me, her eyes wide with determination, but I could see the shadows creeping toward her too, trying to latch onto her spirit. "We need to keep moving," she urged, clutching my hand tightly. Her grip felt steady against the chaos, a lifeline amidst the storm of despair that swirled around us. As I followed her deeper into the tower, I felt the malevolent energy pool at our feet, claws of darkness reaching up, grasping for any weakness. The walls began to close in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the very structure was alive, feeding off our fear, wanting to take us deeper into its maw. I looked over my shoulder, and the corridor we'd entered was already shifting, the shadows rearranging themselves, forming nightmarish shapes that morphed into figures from my past. I saw teachers who had labeled me a failure, their mouths moving in silent accusation, faces blurring into one another like a haunting slideshow of regret. "Keep your eyes on the light," Evelyn called, her voice piercing through the suffocating gloom. I obeyed, focusing on the fluorescent glow we had seen earlier. It flickered like a candle, fighting against the encroaching shadows, pulsating with a heartbeat that felt both familiar and foreign. But even as I turned my head, the darkness sought to invade my mind, dragging forth memories I wished to forget. Suddenly, I was back in that classroom. The wooden desk splintered under my hands as the teacher's voice bore down on me like a weight pressing against my chest. "You'll never make anything of yourself," echoed through my mind, that cruel laughter mingling with the damp air. I could feel the shadows closing in tighter around my mind, circling like vultures waiting for a moment of weakness. ready to dive in and consume me whole. "No!" I yelled, clenching my fists until my nails dug into my palms. I refused to believe that. The room shifted again, and I stumbled as the ground shook beneath me. The dim light flickered wildly as a thick fog rolled in, obscuring my vision, isolating me further from Evelyn. I bobbed in the fog, disoriented sounds echoing off the walls, whispers becoming loud and indistinct, swirling into a cacophony that clawed at my sanity. "You are lost," they taunted, breathless and cold, wrapping around me. "You belong here." Panic rose within me, and I shouted, "Evelyn!" My voice was swallowed by the thick mist, the darkness curling around me like tendrils eager to pull me under. Just then, I felt a tug at my arm, and the fog receded for a moment. Evelyn stood there, her face lined with concern, the light illuminating her features with glowing intensity. "Stay close to me," she yelled, her voice resolute against the noise around us. "We can't let it divide us." With a deep breath, I nodded, and together we pressed onward, feeling the ground pulse with each step. The tormented walls began to shift again, grotesque shapes bulging from the shadows, forming faces that sneered at us in mockery. One of them took shape from my darkest memory, my best friend standing at a bus stop, tears streaming down her face. I had walked away, failing to comfort her in her time of need, filled with a hollowness that cut deeper than any blade. "Remember," the figure jeered, its voice a twisted echo of her own. "You chose to leave. You abandoned me." That feeling of guilt weighed heavy in my throat, choking back the light within me. I wasn't just fighting against shadows. I was battling the guilt of every choice I had made, every heart I had broken. "Stop!" I yelled, forcing the words out through the weight in my chest. "You're not real. You don't own me." In that moment of defiance, the ground beneath me quaked, sending shockwaves through the tower as the walls shuddered in recognition of my strength. I could feel the shadows pulling away, retreating to escape the power I had summoned. They tried to claw at my resolve, but I knew now I had a choice. "Focus on the light," Evelyn shouted, weaving through the fog toward the illumination that beckoned us. I followed her, heart pounding as we stepped over the creeping tendrils that slithered beneath our feet, inching forward, refusing to let them entangle us. Yet even as we bolted forward, the air grew thick again, and the whispers returned, this time louder, more insistent. I could hear my own voice weaving through the fabric of the shadows, echoing doubts that had once kept me awake at night. "What if you fail again? What if you lose everything?" The words merged into a single chilling mantra, a ghost that refused to fade away. Then came the clamor of twisted laughter, hissing from the walls like snakes ready to strike. "You're not strong enough to face the truth." But I wasn't alone. I turned to Evelyn, who was shaking her head defiantly, her eyes shining with fierce resolve. "We are stronger together," she stated firmly. "We've faced darkness before. We have the light within us." Her words ignited something in me, a fire that surged through every limb, dispelling the chilling whispers that threatened to drown my spirit. I took another step forward, catching a glimpse of the light at the end of the hallway, shining brighter as we approached. As we moved closer, the laughter turned to screams, the shadows swirling around us, trying to block our path. They twisted and contorted into grotesque forms that reached out like spindly fingers, scraping across my skin. With every step, "We are reclaiming ourselves," I shouted and echoed the sentiment, feeling the heat of our combined energy create an aura that pushed against the terrible storm of darkness. But just when I thought the path was clear, the ground shifted violently, and the shadows surged back with a primal roar. The air grew thick with pallor, choking me as blackness threatened to envelop my senses. I gasped, fighting against the pressure. From the depths of that chaos, a figure emerged, a tall, shadowy entity cloaked in swirling darkness. Its outline resembled someone I once knew, someone whose deception had cost me dearly. The face was familiar yet distorted, a nightmarish version of a friend I had trusted. "I am the pain you carry," It rasped, the voice echoing off the walls like thunder. "You can never escape me. You invited me in." Every word felt like a stab to my heart, bringing forth memories of betrayal and loss that plagued my mind. The shadow advanced, growing larger and darker, its presence suffocating as it loomed over us. I could hear the resonating laughter of the shadows merging with its voice, taunting, "You will never be free. You are mine." But with Evelyn by my side, I felt a flicker of defiance spark within me. I refused to let the darkness claim dominion over my soul. "You do not own me," I shouted with every ounce of energy I had left, the words cutting through the fog like a blade. The ground beneath trembled as the echoes erupted into chaos, forcing the shadows to waver, their grip loosening ever so slightly. I felt the light around us pulse, responding to my declaration, amplifying with renewed strength. "Evelyn, now!" I urged, and she nodded, her eyes filled with fierce determination. Together we summoned our light, merging it into a brilliant force that consumed everything in its path. The shadows shrieked in horror as wave after wave of brightness erupted, flooding the corridors of the tower, consuming all that tried to hold us back. But the looming figure would not falter. "You think this will save you?" it hissed, the shadow stretching out like a dark hand reaching for our very souls. "You think you can extinguish what you've invited into existence? You made the choice to let me stay with you. With every ounce of my will, I press forward. I choose to rise above," I proclaimed, forcing the words to echo through the suffocating silence. "I choose to confront you." The light exploded around us, the air vibrating as the ground quaked beneath our feet. Tendrils of shadow began to dissolve, recoiling, fighting against the surge. I felt the overwhelming fear begin to lift, the oppressive weight of regret fading into the background as the entity shrieked and ricocheted off the walls, anger and desperation filling the air. More shadows erupted around us as the walls shifted, forming into swirling vortexes of expressions, both anguished and fearful. Faces that haunted my dreams now twisted with rage. I couldn't erase the pain, but I could confront the darkness. I concentrated, drawing from the well of memories, using the pain as fuel to strengthen the light. Together, we moved toward the light, I shouted, taking a step forward, rallying my strength as the shadows swirled around us like predatory beasts, clawing and biting at the edges of my sanity. Just then, a deep rumble pulsed through the tower, echoing in a terrifying crescendo. Every face I encountered was a part of me, woven together by experiences too painful to relive, yet too real to ignore. I saw my childhood fears, every moment I had tried to bury, every source of doubt that had trailed my steps like an unwanted shadow. The conflicts of past choices clawed at my psyche. But standing beside me, Evelyn's presence felt like a beacon against the dark, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. I focused once more on the light, envisioning it bursting from within our intertwined hands, illuminating the path forward. With a final surge of will, we propelled the brilliance toward the creature, watching as it began to unravel at the edges, its form disintegrating like smoke caught in the wind. "I am not afraid of you," I declared with unwavering confidence. "You will not trap me." The entity screeched, a cry of anguish that vibrated through the air and sent waves of unease crashing over me. I knew we were close to breaking its grip, but there was still a familiar tug of doubt in the back of my mind, a whisper trying to deter my resolve. "What happens next?" I asked Evelyn, even as we faced the creature. "What if it's just the beginning of something worse?" But rather than answering directly, she gripped my hand tighter. Her resolve became a shining thread that united us against the encroaching shadows. "It's not about the end. It's about battling through every moment," she replied, her voice steady. Together, we stood firm at the precipice of dread and hope, ready to push forward, knowing that the journey would always be dangerous, but we would meet whatever lay ahead with courage. As the darkness loomed, pulsating like a cancer, I gritted my teeth against the betrayal and pain attached to every heartbeat. Let's break free, I cried, feeling the light surge within me one last time. Let's reclaim our lives. Just then, a massive wave of brilliance emerged from the core of our combined strength, washing over the chamber, flooding every crevice, disintegrating the shadows that sought to engulf us. The entity screamed one final, guttural howl as it was engulfed, darkness collapsing upon itself, dissipating into nothingness. Yet even as the echoes of its torment faded away, I felt a shudder run through the tower. The walls rattled once more, as if acknowledging our victory while tempting us to lose faith. Is it truly over? I whispered, looking around at the remnants of what had been lingering behind the fog. But deep within the depths of the tower, I could sense something still stirring. Shadows retreating, but whispering promises of return, taunting me with the notion that darkness could never truly be vanquished, only pushed away for now. With my heart racing, I steeled myself, knowing we had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Together, we would continue to walk through the labyrinthine corridors, ready to face whatever remnants of that darkness awaited us in the twilight. Maybe this was not just about surviving the tower, but illuminating the darker places within ourselves, learning to coexist with our shadows while harnessing the light we held inside. And with that thought, I took a step further into the uncertain landscape, knowing I would never walk alone in this fight again. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage as I stepped deeper into the bowels of the tower. The thick layer of fog hung heavy in the air, obscuring my vision and muffling the sounds of our movement. Shadows danced in the corners, twisting and writhing as if rejoicing in our intrusion. I could feel the remnants of darkness swirling around, remnants that still clung to the walls, leaving a chill in the atmosphere that pricked at my skin. Evelyn and I walked in silence, the oppressive quiet thick enough to slice through. Each step echoed ominously, the sound reverberating off the cold stone walls. It felt like we were being watched by eyes hidden just out of sight, waiting for an opportunity to strike. I turned my head, scanning the vicinity for any signs of lurking darkness, and for a split second, I thought I saw shadows shift, slithering behind me like snakes eager to pounce. Do you feel that? I whispered to Evelyn, dread seeping into my voice. Yeah, she replied, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. It's like the tower doesn't want us here. Suddenly, the ground beneath us shifted with a spine-chilling tremor, sending a ripple through the air that knocked us both off balance. I glanced down, noticing cracks spiderwebbing across the stone floor, glowing faintly with an eerie green light. The flickering illumination began to pulse, beating in sync with my racing heart, sending an unsettling vibe through the very marrow of my bones. I could almost hear whispers rising from the cracks, a low hum that promised us doom if we dared to venture any further. Let's keep moving before whatever that is comes awake, I urged, my voice taut with urgency. We pressed on, each step feeling heavier as if the air thickened around us, seeking to latch onto our bodies and drag us down. I could feel sweat trickling down my back, the chill of fear crawling along my spine, making my every nerve scream in protest. With every stride, the whispers grew louder, forming broken phrases that collided with one another, wrapping me in a suffocating embrace of dread. You shouldn't be here, they hissed. You'll regret this. Each statement felt like a dagger aimed directly at my essence, tearing at the resolve I had built. As we turned a corner, a sight appeared that sent a shudder through me. A vast, circular chamber lay ahead, its walls adorned with grotesque carvings that depicted terrible scenes of despair and suffering. The figures in these carvings seemed to twist and contort, their faces frozen in eternally agonized expressions, calling out in silent screams for salvation that would never come. The room felt alive, pulsating with an energy that reeked of sorrow and despair, threatening to tug at our sanity. At the center of the chamber stood a dark altar, the stone slick with a viscous substance that glimmered in the dim light, an unsettling reminder of forgotten offerings and sacrifices made to the phantoms that lurked here. Chills washed over me. I could almost taste the bitterness of sacrifice in the air, thick and suffocating. What have they done here? I muttered, horrified, as I approached the altar cautiously. The atmosphere vibrated with a malevolent pulse, and I felt an overwhelming urge to turn back, to flee from the memories of the past that haunted this place. "Don't look too closely," Evelyn cautioned, stepping up beside me. "We don't know what this place is capable of." But I couldn't tear my gaze away. Drawings flickered, shifting before my eyes as if the stone itself breathed another tale. A tale of lost souls trapped within the walls, their voices forever merging into the darkness that surrounded us. Blood-red streaks marred the altar's surface, and I felt something deep within me resonate, igniting every instinct to run. As I backed away, a low growl erupted from the shadows behind us, echoing off the chamber walls. The sound clawed at my throat, paralyzing me with terror. Evelyn and I turned in unison, our hearts racing as we faced the creeping darkness, which began to thicken, swirling with ominous intent. The feeling was stronger now, an ancient presence returning to reclaim its territory, tightening around us like a vice. "Stay close," I shouted, grasping Evelyn's hand tightly. But as I glanced back, the altar flickered in my peripheral vision, a dark silhouette rising behind it. My breath caught in my throat, and fear leaped within me like a wildfire. "What is that?" The mass loomed larger, a grotesque figure molded from the very shadows we had fought against, eyes glinting with malice, neon green like the cracks on the floor. The air crackled with energy as it twisted into a humanoid shape, mouth stretching into a sinister grin that revealed teeth sharp enough to tear into flesh. "You thought you could escape?" it rasped, voice dripping with disdain. "You brought your light into my domain. Now it shall perish." The room echoed with its laughter, a chilling sound that reverberated against the stone walls, saturating the air with a sense of impending doom. Evelyn gripped my arm tighter, her eyes wide with horror as we took a collective step back, hearts hammering wildly in our chests. "What do we do?" she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. The figure advanced, moving with unnatural grace, shadows trailing behind it like whips ready to lash out. "You'll never defeat that which you cannot see," it sneered, stepping into the light, revealing an impossibly warped face, a cruel mockery of life. "You stand at the edge of oblivion, and I will draw you in." I fought the urge to flee, digging my nails into my palm to ground myself. "We can't show fear." Taking a deep breath, I steadied my voice. "You don't control me," I declared, the defiance spilling from my lips despite the trembling in my heart. "We will not become your prey." With a sudden surge, the light around us flickered and flared, illuminating the shadows momentarily, a blinding beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. For a brief second, I felt empowered, the warmth of courage igniting within me. But then the shadows roared back, a wave of cold that extinguished my light like a candle snuffed out by a fierce gust of wind. The figure lunged toward us, shadows coiling around its limbs like vines, ready to ensnare and drag us into the depths of despair. "Remember your truths," Evelyn shouted, forcing her voice to rise above the cacophony, her courage radiating like a last desperate flame. "We may be afraid, but we have fought our way to this moment. Stand firm." In that instant, memories rushed forth, moments of resilience, of love, and light that had once filled my life. I could hear their whispers beneath the surface, the laughter of friends, the kindness of strangers, the warmth of familiar embrace. Those memories were my armor, and with that realization came an undeniable strength. "Together," I yelled, pulling from the strength of my past, forcing it into the present. The warmth of hope surged back, spilling from our grips, wrapping around us in waves of shimmering light that pushed back against the dark. The figure screeched, its form momentarily flickering as the light swallowed its shadows. Unleashing the passion of my memories, I directed the brilliance towards the figure, watching as it reeled back, shadows shrinking from the intensity. "You have no power here," I cried, thrusting our combined force forward until the glow became blinding. The malevolent figure ripped apart at the seams, howling in anguish as the light consumed it, sending vibrations through the chamber, shattering the oppressive silence. I felt a surge of triumph wash over me as the echoes of its screams faded, replaced by the sound of the collapsing shadows. But even amidst our victory, a chill ran through me, whispering promises of return from the depths of the tower. As the shadows dissipated, I could see the remnants of darkness lingering at the edges of the room, as if preparing for a new confrontation, a promise that the cycle of torment would not end with today's battle. With a deep breath, I glanced at Evelyn. Our souls connected through this chaotic dance of light and dark. We had faced the depths of despair and emerged not unscathed but empowered. "Let's keep moving," I said resolutely, my voice trembling but firm. We stepped from the dark altar, determination fueling our legs as we forged ahead into the twisting corridors of the tower. The air still crackled with residual energy, shadows flickering at the corners of my vision, but I embraced the fear. It was a part of me, a reminder of how far I had come. As I stepped away from what had tried to ensnare me, I knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more apparitions of fear and doubt lurking in the shadows. But I felt different now, raw and unyielding. I carried the torch of resilience, forever illuminated by the light of my truth, ready to navigate the uneasy darkness as I strode into the unknown. The tower may have held countless horrors, but I understood something profound now. Light and shadow coexist within me, and I had the choice to wield them both in my favor. We moved forward, ready to unearth whatever awaited us, knowing together we could conquer even the darkest of nightmares.